is the June, what is today? The 7th, 2022 Teaching and Learning Committee meeting for the School District of Waukesha School Board. First piece of general business is verification that the meeting's been properly posted.
Yes.
Thank you. Second item on the agenda is approval of the Teaching and Learning Committee meetings from last month, May 3rd meeting. Any comments or questions about the minutes? Okay, I'd be looking for a motion to approve. By Mr. Zenobia.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Kozlowski. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? 5-0. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is discussion of our new committee format. I'm going to have Mrs. Landish kick us off, and then we can talk a little bit about how we'd like to approach these meetings as a trial going forward.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Piasek. So, yes, just reiterating for the board members here as well as our community that we are excited about our new teaching and learning format. And by format, we mean that instead of just publishing on board docs our agenda and our attachments in a written format and a presentation format, we also are adding a voiceover to each of our presentations. And so, interesting to see yourself on camera more than like once a month, right? So my team is certainly getting used to that. But we're excited about the format for a variety of reasons. We think it will increase transparency and sort of that personal touch and communication with our community. And we also have these voiceovers available in the public domain on our YouTube channel. So if people go onto YouTube and just search for SDW Teaching and Learning, all the videos are posted there and of course archived so they can be accessed at any time. And we hope that we can have some subscribers to the channel. That way you get an automatic notification whenever something is posted. So I will say we have 13 subscribers so far. It's likely my team, this board, and my grandmother. But with that said, I hope that we will increase our subscribership, again, in a way that we can be proactive with our community and get the good word out about our agenda items in preparation for this meeting. So what we will not be doing is repeating the presentation here. We expect that part of the board responsibility would be that you would look at those voiceovers just like you do as you would have prepared normally for any of the other teaching and learning meetings. So with that said then, my presenters, mostly directors, sometimes teachers, and thank you for being here this evening, will be on hand just to give a brief statement or two about the executive summary, and then just really allow for that dialogue of questions and comments to happen during this setting. So I know Dr. Piasek wants to add a few things, but with that brief description, is there anything you might have questions on? I saw some head nodding, which is good. I hope that just affirms maybe what you already were thinking.
We definitely can have some discussion around this. I would just share a couple other thoughts. I think in the preparation process, the hope is, the expectation is that, we're talking about less than an hour. It's probably prep that we'd all be doing anyway, and instead now we get kind of the guided tour through it, which should help. The goal that we've all been talking about is efficiency and transparency, and I think this hits both. Everything that we're doing from a curricular perspective will have these pre-recorded videos out there. Certainly doesn't preclude us from asking questions and reaching out for clarification on anything. We can always go back, we can always pull up the slides. The documents are going to be made available on board docs as they always have been. I think the one other difference about this is that, for a number of reasons, we will also not be sending out the full packets of paper PowerPoint presentations to everybody. As some of you know, especially the T&L group, that it's a pretty thick packet, and over the last year, I've accumulated, probably 40 or 50,000 pages of paper. So I think there's a cost benefit to this, and also just a redundancy that we're fixing. So we're moving the paper, and then I think if these meetings work the way we expect them to, we'll get more transparency. We'll have more time to really discuss. But I do know there are probably going to be some unanticipated concerns or questions. So I want to talk a little bit about that and make sure that we have our eyes out for what could go wrong. Mr. Como.
Yeah, I appreciate the additional prep time that your team would be putting into this, Jody. I do think the videos, I was able to review those and got a really good feel for things. So from a board perspective, I think this could be really good. But when I put myself in a constituent seat, I think one of the things that their perspective may be a little different, and I'm not in that seat, so I'm guessing. But most people have been used to coming to board meetings, hearing a presentation from administration, having the board debate, and then the board would vote. And so it's almost not as convenient for our constituents. So our constituents will have to do a little bit of homework ahead of time if they want to have the full presentation. So, I think some of our constituents, that's not a problem with. The ones that like to just show up at the meetings, though, they might not get as broad of a perspective on the topic. So, but, who knows? Maybe enough of the topic comes out with our questions. I don't know. But that was the only thing that I saw that we might want to take a look at it from a constituent perspective and what that looks like.
I think that's a very important point. I can maybe respond to some of my thoughts about that. I have been on the other side, as I think most of us have. I also think our constituents probably don't want to stay up until 10:30, 11 o'clock at night trying to get to that last topic. So part of this is about also making sure that we can get to everything. And I've thought about that because we do want to have that transparency. So there is certainly a little bit of prep work that we'd be asking those who are coming to the meetings, or that's where at least they can find that material. I think the other piece as it relates to curriculum, most things come here multiple times. So for the most part, there would be a couple cycles to work through that, but I do acknowledge that there are things that might be a one and done sort of topic. We can certainly revisit those if we think we need more time or if people have extra comments and things, but I think we need to keep an eye on that.
And maybe if we see an issue with that, maybe we treat action items differently than information items.
Sure.
Maybe we have a little bit more of a presentation for action items, just some food for thought.
I think that's a really good idea. We should consider that. Any other comments, Mr. Zenobia?
I do like change, so I think that's good. I think it's positive. To have change from time to time, maybe this isn't, maybe we need to tweak this in the future, I don't know. One thing that I did like, and if I'm incorrect about this, the presentations that we're going to cover tonight were up on YouTube almost 2 weeks ago, is that about right? And then the actual presentations are, the public can find those around the same time frame or as the agenda is posted, like a week later, or?
So we, again, first time, right?
Yeah.
But we did have all the voiceovers completed 2 weeks before the board meeting. Traditionally, we have posted board docs on the day that we put the board packet through, so it's usually the Friday before the week of the board meeting.
Sure.
That's when those documents and agendas become public and posted.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's a good supplement if you're paying very close attention to any of these topics to be able to see the presentation, also the slides. The one thing I think that will be beneficial for everyone, the public included, and this may not always be the case, but the presentations that we saw this week were relatively short. I mean, other than one of them, which I think was a half hour, most of them were under 15 minutes. And I don't know if the people making the videos are trying to be, better with their time and getting everything in quicker, which is more efficient, which I liked, or if we just have short topics this month. I don't know. Maybe that's the case too. So I think there's a benefit to having that type of prep work. There's just a few topics we're going to discuss tonight, 5 or 6, which sitting here listening to the presentations to Mr. Como's point is very beneficial for those who come and those who will watch after. But typically the average presentation is 20 minutes, a half hour longer. So if the norm becomes a more efficient presentation, I think that's a win for everybody, whether we have some here from time to time or not. So thank you.
Thank you for that feedback, Mr. Zenobia. I guess I also want to remind everyone, because I just thought of it as you were talking, that we did sort of break apart our student services topics, right? And so it is shorter because we now are solely focused just in the areas of teaching and learning. In fact, when you talk about content, we've structured it as general business, then the content areas, then we always have key performance indicators, and then just recommendations. So I think that format change beyond the video format, this in and of itself will garner those efficiencies as was spoken about. And then the topics around student services will be on the third Tuesday of each month when they're meeting, so.
Mr. Como?
Yeah, and I assume that, at least for action items, we'll have members of your team, Jody, available to answer questions, or how.
All items,
Okay.
for all items.
Okay.
You can clarify, Jody.
That will not change. They will be here at every meeting with me.
Maybe they'll get to go home a little bit earlier, which I'm sure they would like. I think the other thing I just want to add with respect to the change in the structure of the agenda, and the reason for that was so that we're talking about literacy at all levels, and we're talking about social studies at all levels, because we're jumping around a lot between actions and discussion, and so that will be a little bit atypical, I guess, because we're going to take actions and discussion before we move on to the next topic, so we're going to kind of work through that and see how that feels as just a new functional process. And then I would just add that there will be one more section that would be added to the agenda after the policy committee meets, because it's the 400 series,
The program would be the 2000 series.
the 2000 series policies, which are on programming, that's things related to curriculum, will actually come then to the TNL committee, just as we're doing with some of the other policy sets to other committees. So we'll add that once the policy committee makes those assignments. So, all right. Any other questions or comments on that? I mean, of course, we're always open to feedback, and we'll just kind of see how it goes and probably touch base on this in a cycle or two. Okay. Okay, the next item on the agenda is an opportunity for public comments. We have one speaker tonight, which means they will be allowed 5 minutes and notified at 3 minutes. We expect all speakers to honor our time limit, refrain from using any inappropriate language, and be respectful in their comments. Speakers who do not meet these expectations may be prohibited from speaking at future board committee meetings. Speakers are here to address the board, not the audience. The school board and this committee does not endorse any comments made by members of the community here tonight. We would like to remind our community members of the impact of their words on others and that our children are watching. We commit to communicating with you in respectful and productive ways and ask that you do the same. We also expect that the audience will be respectful of the speaker and of the board and refrain from responding with verbal comments, cheering, applause, or other behavior that will detract from the meeting. Please note that no obstructions can be created between the board and the audience. Visual aids cannot be used, and the area behind the speaker and podium should be kept clear. Also, out of respect for our speakers, please silence your cell phone. Our speaker tonight is Paul Reese.
Good evening. No, this just doesn't get better than this. All the way here, I realize I finally have a smile on my face coming to the school board meetings. It is just, I realize, well, it's really great nowadays. I want to comment about what you just commented about, and I agree with Joe a lot on this. You know, part of the reason I show up here is because I know if I don't show up here, I don't have time to listen to this. Unless I make an appointment, I won't. You know, so that's part of the reason I come here, is because if left up to my own, I got a 4-year-old and a 14-year-old. I don't have time. And there's always a distraction. There's always someone calling me to do something. I can always find something to do. And someone will always ask me to do something. So that's part of the reason I come here. I make it a point to come here so that it's out of the way. You know, I got that time set aside and no one can bug me. The other thing is tonight is to see where the rubber hits the road here. We put a lot of work, and there's going to be the work coming up on what we're going to do with social studies. So whether or not we're going to keep economics as a requirement, as a standalone requirement, and what we're going to do with human geography. Everything's open here. So I really hope we keep economics as a requirement. It was one of the things, even when I came back here and started coming here, I was like, oh, cool, it's still a requirement, because it was a requirement when I was in high school, and I got a lot out of that class. My senior year, I got a lot out of, period. But the notion that our senior year should be less than other years, that it should be a coast, I think is a fool notion. It should be one of your hardest years. You're getting ready to go on in life. Life is not going to get easier after high school. It's going to get more difficult. And we need to have more requirements and expect more out of our kids at the end than we do the beginning. I'm not a fan of human geography. I think that needs to go away. I think there's other things that we can use to put in that place. I would love to see it go away this year. My daughter's going to be in it, and I would rather her not be in it. I'd rather at least be one semester requirement for this year and not the full year, half a credit this year, and then be an elective years after, or whatever you want to do with it. But so that's where I'm at. I'm interested to see how you guys do, because this is one of the things that 3 ran on, and we'll see what happens. I'm hopeful, at least tonight. It wasn't always so. But anyways, thanks.
Thank you, Paul. All right. The last item in our general business tonight is an update on the Whittier Achievement Gap Reduction Grant, and we have Principal Hart from Whittier. Hi, Brandy. Welcome.
Okay, so yeah, since this is our first time, normally the presenter, like Brandy Hart, it's so good to see you, will come up and just kind of give you a little introduction about why she's here. So I'll just throw you the softball, and you can just kind of reiterate on the executive summary.
Okay,
Why you're doing
so
it.
I am
We've all
here
seen it.
to give the report on our AGR, or Achievement Gap Reduction Grant. It's part of the grant that I have to come here and make sure that you guys have an update at least twice a school year. So this is my second update for this school year.
So since we had an opportunity to review the slides ahead of time, I think it would be helpful if we could, can we cast the slides, and then we can also go to questions as
Do you want me to do it?
folks are going through?
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, I think there'll probably be some reference to them as we get going. And I'll kick us off with a question when Brandy's ready.
Okay, go for it.
Going on behind me, okay. Perfect. Thank you. So Randy, if you could maybe just get us started, I know there's probably a lot of questions around how this work at Whittier is actually going to transfer to Hadfield, and that was part of your presentation. Can you share back with us what the plan is for that and what the timeline is?
Yes, of course. So I'm going to skip down, should have just left it there. I'm going to skip to the action steps at the end of the presentation, and that's where I addressed it in the video if you go back. So these are action steps as we move into next school year. So next school year, this grant will come with us for support of our students. So we will continue to work on self-regulation for our learners, keeping our learners in the seats. Continue with fidelity of instructional minutes, taking a look at what our new curriculums look like and what the minutes need to look like to make sure everyone has a master schedule that shows that. Our new math program does require a little bit more minutes, so we want to make sure people are trained, people are organized, people are ready to go and planned before the beginning of the school year. We will have 2 full days of training coming up next week. Oh my goodness, next week. That's coming fast. Next week, 2 full days of training and then a half day when we get back in August. There's also a makeup day for the teachers or staff members that weren't able to come next week. So we have that all ready to go, and within that comes organization, comes planning, comes looking at new units, comes being launched before kids enter the classroom. So everyone's on the same page. PD is going to continue, and our strong focus for the entire district really is going to be on writing and making sure that writing is connected to all things we do. Writing is connected to math, writing is connected to science, social studies, reading, all the things. We're very, very excited about that because we know it can definitely impact our learners. To go to the grant, we're going to be focused on only coaching and tutoring. So coaching and intervention next year is how the money will be spent. There are 3 ways that the money can be spent within the grant, and we are choosing to move away from using this money for small class sizes. In the past, that's all it's been used for, and so now we are seeing that we have a direct impact more so with supporting inside the classroom and building up that expertise in our staff than we do with just saying you have 18 kids in your classroom. So that is a change, and we are going to be doing that next year with 2 coaches instead of 1 coach and some small class sizes. So we're taking that class size out. So the coach's duties will be basically 50% support and coaching in the classroom to build the expertise of the teachers, and the other 50% of the day would be focused on intervention, working specifically with kids, and targeting the skills they need to close those gaps.
Brandy, I recall the last time that you presented to us, or I think it was this past fall, it's all blurring together, but you had commented about the small class sizes and that potentially we weren't seeing the effect that was maybe expected from that. So it's not, just maybe put some clarification around, it's not a decision that's driven by the merger necessarily, but it's something that we did try and didn't see as much of an impact maybe as other strategies.
Definitely. We've been talking about it too for a couple of years, way before the merger was really talked about or on the table. And we aren't loading the classes at Hadfield with 30 children. We are sitting at a pretty good number, between 20 and 22-ish. I haven't looked at the enrollment numbers, but, and so if you think of using this money to stay that we have 18 children as opposed to 21, like the better bang for our buck right now is to make sure the teachers are supported and we are building their expertise.
Questions or comments?
Yeah, I think one of the key questions that I had, right, is taking a look at all of this, because one of the pieces that we hear a lot of, especially parents, when we were talking about the merger, was the concern of growing class sizes and the impact that has. So with the class sizes going up a little, what does that mean for additional teacher support in the classroom? Or is the teacher still managing to the 21, 22? By themselves without the aides or any pieces like that?
I mean, yes and no. So if you think about the structure that we'll be having, let's just use one grade level, for example, with let's just use first grade. 3 first grade teachers, with rooms that walls open so they can kind of share as they want to, so flexibly grouping students based on need. But there's also a special education teacher that's assigned to those 3 rooms. So now you have 3 adults, regular ed teachers, plus 1 special education teacher. So now we're up to 4. If there are high needs of students, we'd still have our special education assistants to make sure we're meeting those minutes. Kindergarten will still have a regular ed assistant within those 3 kindergarten rooms to support children. And we really kind of treat our assistants as teachers, and that means they do pull groups sometimes. They do review, phonics or the things that we're learning. We train them to make sure that kids are supported no matter what. Now, any of the coaches that we have, as they go in, they are supporting. They may pull a group right in the classroom, and so yes, there will be a couple more kids in the classroom, but that's not always a bad thing. We have great teachers, and I think that we will be fine.
Okay. The other piece that I have is data, right? So I like to look at data. How are we gathering it? How are we measuring it? How are we assessing it? How do we know that they're actually hitting the benchmarks, right? So what are the milestones that we're actually testing versus, in for lack of things, pushing kids through versus making sure that they are hitting where we expect them to be, giving them extra support when they need it, and then as they make their milestones, moving them to the next level.
So just speak on data that we're using?
Yep.
Okay, so this was an example in the video that I talked about, one of the ways we look at MAP data. Obviously, we only give the MAP assessment to students in 3 times a year, so that's not fast enough. I hear what you're saying about we need to know, but this is a pretty good let's just check, right, and see how we're doing. Running records, we are required by the district to also do that within increments, but at Whittier, and then hopefully we bring this also to Hadfield, we check monthly. Within the classroom, if the child is in any kind of intervention, they're progress monitoring weekly. So I do think with the PD we had this year, with the PCL model, we were able to have a faster cycle of figuring out if kids are reaching those targets or if they're not. And I think we saw the most success this year in our first grade, where we had the AGR coach and title support, making sure that those targets are checked in on and happening both in the regular classroom, if they're being pulled out for title support, or if they're being pulled out by the AGR coach and intervention teacher, that everything is the same. We're working on the same skills, and if we're all together, the amount of teamwork it takes to kind of close those gaps, especially when we're deep in the red, it is being collaborative and having those checks. And that's what we did this year. Obviously, we have a lot to go. We're not where we want to be, but we did see success in that grade 1, especially with all those layers.
Good, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Como?
Yeah, let's just stay on the scattergram a little bit.
Sure.
So you said you'll look at this 3 times a year?
Mm-hmm. So MAP, is given 3 times a year for everyone.
And you'll look at this scattergram then?
Mm-hmm.
I think this scattergram is very powerful. I think it's quite telling. I know it's just a snapshot. So can you kind of take me through? So you take a snapshot, you know who the kids are. So what do you do with this data?
Sure. So that's a great question. So you guys all know how this works, right? The top half is where we want our kids to be: high achievement, high growth, or high growth and low achievement, because that's the step you need to get over to the green. But this pink section is our most concerning section, right? So when we have a data delve after a MAP assessment, we take a look at each child individually and figure out what they need. Teachers have a document, I guess you could say, and they have to input how much they grew, where they are, everything about that child, and then what's next. And what's next may be in the classroom. The intervention happens in the classroom within I-time is what we call it. That's our intervention block. Or it may be more significant, and then they go with a title teacher. It's figuring out who they are, maybe why. This may be one test. You may see a blue dot A that just tested on 100-degree weather and they were not feeling it. So we do have to piece that out. One data point is not a child, right? So and people report on that and they figure out where we need to go for intervention. Sometimes it's a one-on-one intervention, sometimes it's a small group, but that's what we do after the MAP assessment.
Yeah, and, key for me in everything that you said is every student. So we're not just looking at a particular quadrant or two quadrants. We're looking at every student. And I think that's important. Obviously, you guys know that.
Yes.
But for our constituents to know and understand that we're not just looking at one piece of the data and just analyzing what can we do better.
And I
We're
tried to
looking at
point
each
that out.
student and tailoring what we can do for each student.
Absolutely, and try to point that out on a couple different slides, but this one particularly, because you can see, like student A, this cute little girl right here, right? She did make it to our chart. She or he, whoever they are, was 50 percentile or above, but you see great growth that didn't make it to your chart, but you also see great growth that was on your chart and as high as could be, and they're still growing. So I do think that's important and super powerful to know that every single child is known for themselves and for their academic abilities and for what they're still working on. And that is the culture that we have grown.
Thank you very much.
Any other comments or questions? Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
have a couple. You mentioned the two coaches. Now, you had one last year at Whittier. Was there one already at Hadfield? Did we go out and find a person?
So AGR is only given to one school in the school district of Waukesha. So Hadfield probably has had coaches district level, but not for the AGR, specifically to help kindergarten, first, second, or third grade.
But, so I was just trying to understand, you said you had we're adding someone in,
Correct.
so there will be a second person.
Yes, so the allocation of that grant, those grant dollars, instead of being used for small class sizes and this coach, we're taking away those small class sizes and putting the coach in that use of the fund, if that makes sense.
Yeah. The other question I had was on the professional development. Are all of the teachers going through that for literacy?
Yes.
So everyone at Whitfield, or I'm sorry, Whitfield, name change, Whittier and Hatfield, all the teachers are going to go through that and have the focus on literacy?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
very good. That was all I had. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Markel, do you have a comment? Go ahead.
A comment. I think this is great. Brandy and I, we talked lots of times previously, and I just thank you for the work that you're doing. But I think, what you're doing is good at Whittier and what's going to be going into Hatfield. Just one question I had for you, though, is what are you hoping to see in terms of the teacher quality? I know you talked a little bit about that in terms of the coaching. About teachers, the coaches going to be there to, enhance the teacher's expertise. And so, could you just share, what are some key indicators or key elements that you're looking for in terms of improving the teacher quality?
And teachers, sure. So I think some of the things that we highly value are lesson planning, making sure that we are ready before the kids enter, and then, collaboration around children, around teaching. So when we get together, we're very focused on what we're learning. We're talking about instruction because the more we do with each other, we're stronger. So those are the top two things. I think we have to be planned. We have to be sticking to our minutes, flexibly. We know that things go crazy in an elementary school. So, but we have to have targets, and having those targets will help everyone. The coaches support the teachers, the titles support the children, the admin support everyone. We just need those things. So those are the things I think we value most: lesson planning, collaboration, and sticking to making sure kids are learning.
I do just have one other question, and I really appreciate the detail that you put into talking about the goals that we set and how we achieve them or not as a group, but then as the individuals progress. So with the goals of approximately 50% at competency or at the 50th percentile or above, how will those goals and or assessment toward those goals change now that the classes become merged classes?
I don't know quite yet. My gut says to keep it 50% or more, but I'm saying that without knowledge of exactly what Hadfield's data looks like. So that will be something that we will determine once we're fully merged, but I don't really know the answer to that right now.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. I mean, I think, obviously, the progress that's shown is relevant. We want to make sure that the kids who started with this support and are going to continue with that support keep that progress, and I think that's something that really is a positive, and the way that you're looking at, the way all teachers, but the way we're looking at the individual students and making sure that they're growing. But it will be interesting to just kind of think through how we calibrate this with the bigger groups of students. Any other comments or questions? All right, thank you.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
you're welcome.
Okay, so for the next part of our experiment, we are moving into our content areas on the agenda, and tonight we have literacy and social studies on the agenda. We're starting with literacy. The first item on the agenda is the elementary writing resource, and we again have...
So I'm Melissa Yao, Director of Elementary 4K through 5th grade, and we have Emily Freeman, who is our District Elementary Literacy Coach. And I'll pull up
Welcome
the
to you.
slideshow for you. Oh, hold on, I got it.
All right, so as with other curricular items, these come multiple times, so we had a...
Yeah, and I
Go ahead, Jody.
I'll set us up for this. So you have heard this over the past 3 months. So, and with every item, as Dr. Piasek has mentioned, we will not ask the board to take action on something that you haven't seen. At least this will be the 3rd time that you've seen it. So, and actually the 4th, because they did an extra little ditty. In that process, though, you've asked questions. If there's been feedback, they've taken attention to that and brought it back. I would say this is one of the less controversial adoptions, in my opinion, in terms of the feedback you've given thus far. I will say in the classrooms that I was in at the end of the year with our teachers piloting this, specifically at Rose Glen, the teacher sticks out to me like they are thrilled about having this resource. So just available for comments, and you probably heard that too. You're hearing that a little bit? Yeah. So just any questions or comments from the team as we look to eventually make a motion for approval of the benchmark writers workshop for the elementary level.
Okay, Ms. Kozlowski.
So I went through the entire 3rd grade book. For the first time for me to be able to really hear and see the teacher feedback and look at the curriculum. What I loved about it is that it compounds and that it's building through the course of their elementary cycle, right? And I thought that was a well-needed long cry in the dark that we've been hearing from teachers, from parents, from students, is how are we doing this? The modeling of it, the book flow was great. I thought the curriculum was outstanding. So I was very impressed. Truly, I enjoyed actually going through the book. So here's my catch. The one thing that we hear a lot, and it's not necessarily something you'll have an answer for today, but when we hear that we are implementing and building on our curriculum, what comes away, right? What do we start to say that we hear from our teachers isn't working? I've heard a lot about CLM or the whole language and things like that. When we start to put the pieces together about how important it is for phonetics and writing and sounds, we're moving in the right direction, it sounds, based on that, and that's outstanding. But the next piece is really, how do we assess what else is all out there, and how do we start to untax the work that's on our teachers, especially when we've got curriculum, right, that is, teachers are having to craft their own, and it's different from here and there.
Right, and this is one reason why we wanted to, bring this in. Writing and phonics are a big part of CLM, or the comprehensive literacy model, that it does start with looking at students understanding how words work and sounds work. And so we are in our second year of implementation with our Phonics resource. It's actually a companion to our writing, which, you know, is a nice fit to get together. We hope that with having the Phonics resource, if approved, having this writing resource, that it will help that initial cognitive load on our teachers and really help provide them with assistance and planning, not because they're not educated, capable, amazing, but it helps with that first lift so that we do have that time where teachers can collaborate together and look, here's what we delivered now, where do we need to make adjustments? Who do we need to, you know, push on? Who do we need to give a second dose to? They can come together because they're all talking about the same thing at the same time. Study the student, work, look at that, give better feedback to students and work together. And so by having a high-quality resource, it helps support high-quality teachers into becoming, you know, even more exceptional at what they do. In turn, hopefully, having students not only show growth, but also achievement.
Wonderful, thank you.
Other comments, questions? Mr.
Yeah,
Como?
just, if you could touch one more time on the professional development. It's throughout the year. And can you kind of just give us those highlights of how you're going to assure that our staff really gets fully trained in this?
Yeah, that's one thing that we were really concerned about. There's been times in past history when things have been, well, just one and done, right? We adopted a math curriculum years ago, and they had one training, and it was good luck for the rest of the time. And you could imagine how that went. We don't use that resource anymore, didn't show the results that we wanted. And so we want to make sure that we don't repeat history like that we look at what are the multiple opportunities, not across just the first year of implementation, but over a number of years to make sure that we are setting ourselves, our teachers, and our students up for success. So I'm going to let Emily speak a little bit to what we've been planning around this area.
Yes, so our first year, we have a launch happening at Summer Institute, and we have provided some summer alternate options if there's people who would like to learn about it earlier. And we already, they know it's pending on the approval, but we already have over 100 teachers that have signed up to come in this summer. They're really eager to do that learning. And then it will be at Summer Institute as well if there's people who aren't going to be joining us this summer. But then we have, throughout the process, built-in professional development that this is guaranteed common professional development that every elementary teacher will get. In October, we'll be looking at developmental writing behavior. So we know that in order for teachers to bring this curriculum to life and really have it impact students, they need to, as well as have that solid resource, understand how writers change over time and that support that they need. So in October, we'll be doing professional development on what that looks like and how students change and the support that they need, as well as students will have just done the fall district writing assessment that we're going to be bringing back. And so they will have built-in time to calibrate in their building while they score those writing assessments, coupled with that understanding of what student writing should look like, because we know that calibration is really important. Then in January at the Whittier Institute, we're going to be deepening understanding around our state standards of writing so they can see that connection with the writing program and the grammar, as well as Whittier Institute presents a really nice opportunity where teachers come together from across the district, and the winter writing district assessment will have just happened. And so we'll be able to do some scoring calibration now, not only within their own building, but with all the third grade teachers at the table from across the district to really be looking at, are we all expecting the same thing? Do we all have a common definition of what a strong lead means for a fourth grade student? To really calibrate around that. And then in spring, we will be revisiting that spring writing assessment. They'll be back in their buildings, calibrating again, and looking at that growth over time. That's one of the things we're excited about with this assessment, is to really, it's not part of the program, it's a separate assessment based on the state standards, to be able to say, what is the impact that this is having on students? And those are just the district professional development pieces, and so in buildings, all of the buildings will also be planning what professional development support they have in between those 4 dates to really bring it to life in their building.
Yeah, I think excellent planning on the professional development. Now, we have to execute, right? It's one thing to have a plan, but then to go forward and execute. And I'm excited to see what you have presented in front of us.
Mr. Moore?
So, can y'all hear me? Okay, sorry about that. So with the professional development, I just had one question. I like the layout, and I like the deepening understanding of the Wisconsin state standards, and the fact that teachers will be able to collaborate based on their grade levels across the district. I think those are great, and I would like to see more of that from the beginning. So is there a way that, again, in August, that we can do 2 parts? One part is in August, before school starts, where those teachers are building community with other teachers across the grade level, across the same grade level in the district, and saying, here's what the state standards are, because school starts in September, not January. So the first part will be, here's what the state standards are, here's some of the things that we can do to, like, let's say we have 3rd grade teachers meeting all across the district at the PD. Here's how we can do some revisits from 2nd grade curriculum, just to freshen up the 3rd graders coming in. And then here's what our goals are for the year for 3rd grade, in the literacy standards and the curriculum, et cetera. And then circle back in January and say, all right, guys, how's everybody doing? How did the first semester work for everybody? And just, I think that community and collaboration is very vital. So is there a way that there can be 2 pieces to that, to not only enhance teacher collaboration, but enhance the students' learning as well?
And I should have said that the August date is cross-district.
Okay.
And it will be grade level specific. So depending on which of the 3 days they are at, all 3 of those days will have teachers from the grade level and special education teachers as well, all coming together. We're not going to go super deep into the standards quite yet on that first day, but we will be looking at the district writing assessment, which is based on the standards. So we'll be able to really explain, this is 3rd grade or this is 2nd grade standards. So it won't be a deep dive until January, but definitely that initial exposure,
Yeah.
so that we have time to get to know the program, but also, like you said, build that community and hopefully make connections across the district, so you know which other grade level teachers you might want to collaborate with.
Yeah, and I think that's important, because I'm seeing it from a teacher myself. Collaboration is very important, and it can be overwhelming if you are by yourself, or you feel that you don't know something, and having that collaboration, that community. Even if I'm a 3rd grade teacher at Rose Glen, having that opportunity to reach out to a 3rd grade teacher at Lowell and say, hey, from our PD, has this worked for you? And this is working for me, or this is not working for me. Do you have any ideas? And they may be able to help that other teacher out. So I like that. So
Definitely, thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? I will just add, and I have a question related to it. I really do like the consumable part of this. I think the piece that the kids can take home, it makes learning more seamless and really engages the parents as well. I know that we're also paying for digital access for students. Can you just remind me, what is the balance of electronic work versus hands-on work?
Everything that is paper is available digitally, and in the writing program, there isn't anything that's digital that's not available paper, so it really is a teacher decision. Like those consumable workbooks, everyone will have access to on their iPad as well as a physical copy, and so depending if they were doing something with annotating that they wanted to use their iPads for, they would have that option, but the students would also have a paper book as well. So there isn't really a percentage prescribed by us or the district, but they have physical copies and digital access to everything. In our experience with Phonics, it seems to be that the digital portion is really used for the phonics games, and teachers like the digital access because for planning, then they're not carrying all the books back and forth. So that seems to be the way that it is mainly used, but it also is nice if a student is out unexpectedly and their consumable is at school, that they can just send it to them either in a PDF copy or they can access it in their Benchmark Universe account. So it gives a lot of options and flexibility.
That's great. Thank you. Okay, are there any other comments or questions? So at this point, we'd be looking for a motion to approve the materials.
I make the motion to approve the elementary writing resource benchmark.
Moved by Ms. Kozlowski,
I second.
seconded by Mr. Moore. Any other questions or discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, 5-0. Thank you.
Just y'all wait. They're going to be excited to see the impact.
We're going to hold you to that.
Please do.
Yeah, we'll see you back in September with outcomes.
Right. Yeah, week 1.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Next on the agenda, keeping with the literacy theme, is discussion of high school English instructional resources.
Excellent. So I'll set this up as well, right? We have Tiara Rogers and Nancy Ronke presenting this evening. This would be the second time, I believe, that they're in front of you. So again, this is just a discussion item around Study Sync this evening. I did want to mention out loud, because I just had a conversation with at least one of you about board member access. So I wanted to make sure that as you continue to dig into the resources and have your questions answered, et cetera, over this next month, right, in preparation for July, that board member access guide that is the last attachment on your board docs is really what gives you that login information with the username and password, and you can really dig into accessing the content, the different thematic units, et cetera, and you can really get lost in there. But I wanted to make sure that at least you, again, I brought that resource to your attention because we have given you a lot, but sometimes you lose that part of it. So just wanted to make mention of that. So,
Thank you.
They're here for questions and discussion.
Anyone want to start us off? Well, in that case, I will. Not that I ever have questions, but I wanted to start with just a question around the Study Sync Blast. So I was looking into that a little bit. There's a lot of material there. My question is, how is that content decided, reviewed, approved, et cetera, or pushed, and who makes that decision? Is that set within the scope and sequence? Is that kind of, on a day-to-day basis? Do the teachers make that decision? How does that work?
It's really meant to be decided by teachers or professional learning communities because they are updated every single day. So there's some current events that are in there as well. Yeah.
So maybe as a follow-up to that, I think as a board member, we're asked to approve the resource, but we don't actually know what the resource is because it's evolving day by day by day by day. So I think in these cases, we can't ever anticipate what we're going to see. I think this is maybe another way where we have to talk about transparency for parents as well, and making sure that there's full transparency to what's happening in the classroom. And I like to say I don't have any concerns about that, but again, when material is being kind of curated as we go, it's difficult to say what in fact we are approving, other than that portal. And I like a lot of what I'm seeing in there, but what are your thoughts about how we approach that?
There's a couple different ways. It reminds me of Newsella, which is used very all over the district, or commonlit.org. There could be guideposts that are put into place, like these are the type of articles that would fit under that umbrella. Like that's something that could be decided ahead of time.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Kozlowski.
I'm going to piggyback on Dr. Piasek. One of the concerns that I have as a parent is inconsistency with what is being taught by different teachers. And, you know, how do we make sure that our kids are getting the same lesson that they need to from an academic standpoint versus avoiding anything that could be of opinion, bias, and pieces like that. That is a real concern. And with this, that leaves us open to that. And so how can we help structure, you know, one of the reasons, as we just talked through the elementary cycle, is that it's a really great tool and guide for the teachers, and it's consistent, and everybody is doing it the same thing. We're working on professional development the same way. That would be my one concern on this, is that we have a lot of leeway on a lot of different things and interpretation that parents wouldn't know based on different teaching, different classes, et cetera.
I think with the UBDs or the district syllabi, it would be common assessments and also common text. Like if you look at the thematic units, those would be common. The blasts, those are to get engagement. Those aren't, that wouldn't be the full lesson plan. That would be like how you'd engage a class or how you might do something at the end of class. But take a really good look at the thematic units because those are common. And also, if a grade level would decide to do a common novel, those would be common as well. So it's not like a grade level would just decide what to do. They would have that common district syllabi, so that it would be common assessments and common texts.
And what I shared quickly behind you was that online resource that you had access to. And what Nancy was mentioning was the thematic unit. So our expectation would be, if this resource was approved, our teachers would follow the thematic units. So what would be included in the thematic units, the pacing guide is there, is that would be the expectation. So that would be the guarantee. So these would be the items that would be expected across our system that teachers would be doing with their students. So that would be reflective in our development of our UBDs. And again, as we would evolve, there are these novel study options, but we, as a team, we were thinking we would stay within the thematic unit simply because that allows for that transparency and consistency across our system, which is something that the team has expressed we need, because right now, without having a common resource, we don't have those common assessments, we don't have those common texts. So that is something which we liked about this particular resource, is it does allow for that consistency across our high schools in our system.
Yeah, there's common benchmark assessments that prepare them for standardized tests, and also common writing and oral presentation that would happen. You could guarantee that in every single building for that grade level.
Just a quick follow-up.
So when I did this, I had a 7-day trial, right? So what do we have access for parents? Do they have to get a subscription? Do they have to get a trial? How are they able to look at what is being presented out there? Because that's another big thing that we hear.
The password that we have extends past that 7 days. So on the board packet, that should stay pretty indefinitely, that password.
You're saying for existing, like if this is adopted?
Yeah, I logged in under me without this.
So can you just confirm, Nancy? So right, like the username that I'm looking at is the 612 Study Sync, and the password is MH612 Literacy.
Correct.
So I wonder though if your question, Carrie, is like, if this is adopted, how could a parent access the materials?
Correct.
Through that
They'd
same-
be able
Okay.
to access through that, or even the student portal, both ways.
Okay, perfect.
Good, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, Nancy, you had talked about like notation guides, or can you talk to me a little bit about what that might look like? Who would develop that? How would we make sure that they'd be used?
The platform actually has like notation guides like embedded into it, and also 5 different levels of scaffold for so that we're able to read at a complex grade level text, and that it's accessible to everybody. There's graphic organizers for writing that's embedded into the program as well. I'm not sure if that's what you're asking.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted a feel for it. I did go out to the source a little bit, but I didn't get that deep in it yet, so, online, so.
I think my favorite thing about the resource, at least online, is how they handle the vocabulary piece. I think that's just really phenomenal. Maybe going back to just some of the controls around just so much variety with all of this. I asked this question last time about the novels. So there's the hard novels that would be available, and it maybe piggybacks on Mrs. Kozlowski's question. So will it be that every student in 10th grade is reading the same novels?
It is possible for once or twice a year for that to happen. The curriculum team would have to make that decision, and that would be part of the district syllabi.
Okay. And those are things that I assume would also come to the board if they're required, or? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, I think there's pros and cons to that, right? We want to allow some flexibility, and we want to allow engagement and choice around all that, but there's also some academic benefit to having some standard, either classic or even modern text. But, and then I think as we decide how we're going to procure those hard novels and what those are actually going to be, I think, again, that's something that we want to probably have some discussion about how those decisions are made and what that looks like school to school to school. Because I know right now it just seems like you get a little different flavor depending on what school you're in.
Right, and you would start with, so when you look, if we could show that image again, we would start with that thematic unit, but then you can see the novel studies are right next to it. So that's the novels that the team would start with. They would make the decision. For example, I believe it's in 11th grade, they were looking at The Crucible being a whole class novel or a play for one of the units.
Thank you. Mr. Zenobia.
So, sticking with the novels, there was mention of 2 novels included. How many novels are going to be chosen per year, per class? Is it 2 per year?
It really depends on that curriculum team. It would be no more than 2 per year is what we're thinking right now. We would stay pretty much with that thematic unit, and then it would be 1 or 2 per year novel study.
Okay. And I know most of this is online, and this is actually 9th grade here. This is 6 books. How much of this material roughly then is covered, as a freshman in high school? What portion of this material is going to be covered throughout
All
the
of
course?
that. Yes, all of that.
Okay.
Yes.
I was unsure. I like that it had a good balance of a lot of different works, and there's a lot of excerpts, obviously, but there was balance. There's things I wouldn't necessarily want to read, but they were there, and there was good stuff too, from my opinion. So, but it was balanced, and so that was something that I know I have drummed on before. But so that is, I'm happy to see that. I guess then I was unclear as to whether or not they would cover all this material and potentially read 2 novels, which I mean, maybe for freshmen that's a good workload, but I don't know if that's enough. Maybe it is. I guess it depends on the size of the novel. But I appreciate that clarification. That was good.
Yeah.
I did have one other question. There was mention of the coaching network between some of the other schools using this. I think it was West Allis and Green Bay were mentioned. What does that look like? How would that work?
That's something I'm incredibly excited about. So Dr. Doug Fisher, we have him scheduled, it's not approved yet, but we have to get things on the calendar. So August 24th, he would Zoom in with all 9-12 or even 6-12 teachers to talk about the gradual release of responsibility in professional learning communities, because he's an expert in that, and he's one of the lead authors of StudySync, and he uses it in his California school. Just yesterday, I met with the curriculum instruction person in Green Bay, and we started planning what that could look like. I really believe that our teachers, we have to position them as consultants in a real authentic type of atmosphere. So I can imagine our Waukesha teachers at the middle of the year and at the end of the year sharing with Green Bay and possibly West Allis teachers, here's some student work, here is a strategy group lesson that I did, here's the impact of it, here's an oral presentation or a writing presentation that I tried using StudySync. This is a video of my students trying it. This is what I tried as an instructor. Here's the data to support the impact of that instruction. So running parallel to any implementation of a resource is going to be really thoughtful professional development that positions teachers as consultants. And just like with students, we want that to be really authentic. So yeah, we're in the beginning planning of that. I mean, of course, it won't go into full range planning until July, until pending approval.
And just to follow up to that, I didn't see it, maybe it was in here. Are they using this for the first time?
This is their first year.
So, okay,
Yep.
so we'd all be at the same level together as far as our learning networking.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, and what are the next steps in the process?
They're going to be with us on July, what is the date? July 12th, and seeking approval for action at that time.
Okay.
Is that me or?
Well, and I wanted to say something about the blast. If anybody would want to experience that like a student and see what it feels like to have the blast and then do the peer review, because I think that's a very special part of the program that engages students. So I'd be happy to help you experience that.
Thank you. All right. Thank you both. Did you have?
Would we be? I'm sorry. If we did that, would we be graded on it?
No, you'd actually peer review each other anonymously, and then you put little stars. And
Only if it's good, Anthony.
We might implement higher expectations.
I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on to the social studies section of our content areas. So the first item is, am I on the right agenda here? Social studies high school course sequence recommendation.
Is there just the three of us, right?
Yeah, but you can share this mic and I'll steal Jim's mic. Oh, perfect.
I think she.
They're probably not going to both talk at the exact same time, so.
Thanks for being here, both of you. Well, you too, Rachel, but
Good evening. I'll pull up the slide deck.
to set this up this evening, this is, again, probably the third time-ish.
Number 47, I'm going to call it.
Okay, the third 47th iteration of a recommendation we'd like to discuss with you this evening around the course sequence. I just want to, again, commend Rachel's leadership and the teachers in front of you and the teachers that are not in front of you. They really, really have been thoughtful in this process, always with a student-centered, asset-based mindset. So the recommendation they come forth with you holds true to our curricular design process and the recommendation that comes from that team. So it's worth your discussion and pending approval this evening, so thank you.
And can I just introduce, I have with me here Rich Murtis, who is one of our U.S. History teachers at Waukesha South. He teaches both regular and AP U.S. History. And then I have Chris Knutson, who I think has taught almost all of our classes at Waukesha West. And Mark Anderson was going to be joining us. He had a family emergency that arose, so he is not going to be here. So what questions do you have about our presentation?
Maybe just put up the visual too, so
Sure.
people can see that, probably most importantly. There you go.
Yep.
So Rachel and team, I know you're coming with a specific recommendation, which in some previous conversations, we had a series of recommendations. So can you talk a little bit about how you've come to this recommendation following some of the previous questions and discussion?
Sure. So we felt it was incredibly important, as Jody mentioned, to really stick to the curricular design process that the board has approved. And so as we
reconvened as both a curricular design team, but additionally, I, myself and Dee Garcia met with every single social studies department across our high schools. We had some pretty heavy conversation around some of the different proposals that were on the table. We did additional research based on some of the questions and concerns that had been posed around some of the alternative recommendations, specifically looking at what would happen if we changed the scope and sequence entirely, looking at perhaps the removal of a regular level human geography class, looking at perhaps increasing the requirement of social studies to 4 credits where econ would be required. And after weighing all of that research, after having discussions with social studies teachers across our district, we came back to the conclusion that this recommendation is, from our educators' point of view, what we believe is what will serve the students best in the school district of Waukesha. And we can stand by that recommendation as what we think will serve all students best. One of the things that I'm just going to slide to this next piece. One of the things that we really considered and weighed heavily was around our AP courses. We surveyed multiple districts that do a different course sequence. The one that really was the only other avenue we hadn't considered and we're beginning to consider. And the AP numbers in those districts were staggering to us. Waukesha was blowing those numbers out of the water. And when we looked at our key performance indicators, when we looked at what we know our AP classes do for students in terms of preparing them for college and career readiness, we felt that our sequence far outweighed a total restructure. And so that was really how we landed on this, was just really taking 2 months apart from the last time we came in front of you to really do some additional digging, make sure that we were coming forth with what we believed is a solid recommendation. And again, we originally had just the curricular design process team looking at this work, but we additionally then met with every social studies department. Dee and myself met with, again, the directors across Waukesha County Schools. There was a lot of conversation that went into this recommendation, and we stand behind that. We think that this is what is best for kids.
Thank you. I know there's been a lot of time and effort, so I'm grateful to you and your team, our social studies departments, and our administrators for spending the time, a lot of it at our request and recommendation, so appreciate that.
I forgot one thing. We also engaged counselors this time in the last 2 months in our discussion, because as you can see in our recommendation, we're really putting that decision in the hands of parents and families to make whether or not they want their child to acquire those personal finance state mandated standards through economics or through personal finance. And we had some conversation with our counselors on their perception of how that would be viewed with parents. Do we have avenues in place to inform parents of how to make an informed decision around that? Do we take both? Can I take AP, right? What does that look like? And our counselors also viewed this as an incredibly favorable recommendation. I forgot that that was a stakeholder group that we didn't originally bring into our recommendation process, but that we did engage in that 2-month window that since we last came to you.
So I have just a couple questions. I've probably asked a million already, so I'm trying not to repeat, but what will be in the econ class if this, as an optional class, if the standard, is this still including the proposal to infuse all of those econ standards into the existing classes?
So the state mandates that we integrate economic standards into our social studies classes, so that will happen either way. Our current economics class will continue to run, and we're actually revising it. It's on the docket to undergo a curricular revision next year, but it would continue to take more of a micro look at economics. I believe I provided a syllabus in one of our board packets for economics. I would have to pull that up to look exactly at what those essential questions are and those enduring understandings. I don't have those off the top of my head, but I can get them. But it's really taking a deeper dive specifically into those economic standards as a standalone, and not necessarily integrating them with those other 4 strands of history, or I'm sorry, of social studies.
My other question goes to the AP enrollment, and I actually really appreciate the perspective that human geography may be a more appetizing class for a freshman to jump into AP as opposed to world history, which I think is kind of just daunting in perception. With that, and I think initially I'm happy to hear that our AP enrollments are high, maybe higher than other high schools. But I'm curious how that enrollment in AP classes correlates to ACT scores, college enrollment, overall forward exam results. Because if I look at how we compare to the districts around us, and maybe that we're comparing AP enrollment to, it doesn't seem like we're getting the same outcomes. So what does that AP enrollment mean for us in terms of overall student achievement?
I think that's a data point that we continue to unpack. This year was the first year that we identified really an analysis of our AP scores, both our test scores as well as our classroom scores, as a key performance indicator. I think if you ask, I'm going to look at Rich, because Rich has been teaching AP US History for a very long time. He has been chosen by the College Board to be a scorer of those AP US History tests. And they are analyzing the impact and the correlation of those scores to those students' performance, their college entry, all of that. I don't know if you want to speak to that. As teachers, all the time. I think as a system, we have some work to do around that correlation, because I don't know that we've triangulated that data point with forward, with ACT. I don't know that we've pulled subgroups of students to say, here's a group of students that's taking 3 or more AP classes, and how do they compare on the ACT to those who aren't? We haven't done that work, but it's work that needs to be done, especially, again, in conjunction with the KPIs that we've now adopted. You want to add anything, Rich, to how you?
No, I think that's really good. I guess I'm here to advocate for any plan that would maintain what I think really sets us apart here in Waukesha, which is the numbers in our AP programs, the success of our students in our AP programs, particularly the AP Human Geo, and from my end, the AP US History. This has been really a bright spot, I think, for Waukesha. And I can tell you countless stories of students who have been able to challenge themselves, and I think have derived all kinds of benefits from having had that AP experience based on the model that we have in place right now. So my concern, my worry, my fear would be that we would end up leveling down rather than leveling up, and we would incentivize or discourage students from enrolling in those AP classes that we know have endless benefits for our students.
Thank you. Mrs. Kozlowski.
So I have a couple questions just kind of going through this. Human geography right now does not have a textbook or a curriculum, right? So teachers are really kind of cultivating, per se, the curriculum for that.
I want to clarify, it doesn't have a textbook resource to support our regular level human geography. Our AP course does have a board-approved textbook. And in terms of curriculum, we do have a syllabus for that course that has identified essential questions, identified units of study. But similar to all of our current social studies classes, how teachers arrive at meeting those essential questions and getting students to the proficiency of the standard is left for them to curate on their own.
Okay, and that's been a growing concern for our district, right? And right now, I know that's something that you're trying to work through.
Yep.
But the part that we need to understand is not all of our students are going to be AP level. Mm-hmm. And despite best hopes and pieces, it can often be deflating and hold them back to be given material that they are just not ready to do, especially at a ninth grade level. I will be completely honest, economics needs to be a required course. Personal finance has been part of economics for decades. This isn't a new piece and trying to slice and dice this. Personal experience with children that have gone through financial planning, I've heard they've watched Oprah, and it is not giving them what I would expect them to have from a fundamental understanding of the way the world goes. If the world that we're living in right now, think about inflation, think about what's happening in our economy, they will not understand that if they do not have economics. And the chance that they miss that puts them into a world that they don't understand how the markets work, how things work, why the gas prices are, why there is no formula, and I'm obviously using current events. It would be strongly recommended that we take a look at reducing the human geography. This is an area for me personally that I have concerns on what type of ideologies can come into that coursework. We can't use an AP textbook for all students. That would have been a recommendation that I would like to have seen, is to move us down to a half credit or no credit for that. But I also understand the points that if we do that, then our freshmen lose a half semester of history, and what does that do for them to push them back? World history as a full year credit, US history, those are solid courses, right, that will challenge them and give them the full view of what I expect that they would be for achieving. And my last point is that we take a look at the test scores and where our students are at. My perception is that in some of the decisions we're trying to do is to try to manage to the testing versus making sure that we're doing our diligence to ensure our kids are academically understanding the material. Right, wrong, or indifferent, my point is that we need to be doing a better job, and I think that's what I hear is you guys want to challenge our students, and there's a great gift when our students are challenged and that they can achieve, but that's the accountability that we should expect high standards, period, and pushing them on there. It's taking economics out is just a detriment for their futures, in my opinion.
Mr. Moore.
So thank you all for giving us the presentations and recommendations. I'm the youngest member on this board, so I'm not that far out of high school. And I'm in my 20s, so I try to look back at, high school. I took world history, I took U.S. history, I took a semester of American government, civics, and a semester of economics, and all those courses were vital. I'm trying to understand, why is human geography required? I didn't take that in high school, and I did the 3 years, but I don't understand why is it required. And I'm just asking an open question. Why is it required, and is there any way that could have been a semester reduced to a semester versus a whole year, where those students could still get that vital education with economics and American government? Because I think those three core courses that I just mentioned, world history, U.S. history, economics, and American government, are vital to student success. So I'm going to open up the floor for you.
Sure. So when we did our, I'm going to find this, our root cause analysis as a curricular team to look at why we thought student performance was the way it was, and we looked at not only standardized testing measures, but also classroom assessment measures. We looked at student perception data. One of the things that we uncovered is that we believed that students needed to be in a year-long social studies class their freshman and sophomore year. And the reason for that was that in a social studies class, when we look at the social studies standards, and you'll hear me talk about this in our my next presentation, the literacy standards that a social studies class infuses are just, they go hand in hand with the social studies standards. And so when we look at improving students' literacy skills, which is something we try to do across all disciplines, social studies is just a natural connection to that, far more than some of our other elective areas. And so by reducing human geography to a semester, it puts students in an elective that freshman year in an elective slot, instead of giving them a semester where they're really focusing on building those disciplinary literacy skills that we know a social studies class infuses. Additionally, by removing regular human geography, that was the consideration that was specific to our AP piece. In districts that don't offer regular human geography, their course sequence typically looks like 9th grade is a U.S. history or a 20th century history, because AP College Board does not recommend that world history, which is the first, usually for most students, AP course that they take. They don't recommend it until 10th grade. And so AP Human Geography is the only actual class out of the entire College Board's offering that they recommend at the 9th grade level. And so when you take that out, it really starts to impact your course sequence, which in turn, as we spoke to, it impacts then our students' ability to really want to take those AP classes. In talking with both the director of Muskego and Hamilton, they shared with us that the number of students who take regular U.S. history their freshman year, that even though they're phenomenal students, they tell the students, stretch yourself, challenge yourselves, they don't go back and take AP U.S. history their junior year. They just don't, and that's why you see their numbers. Hamilton was explaining that there are most years they don't even run the course, and we're talking about AP US history. I mean, that's one of, I'm biased, but it's one of, I think, the best AP courses we have. And so again, by eliminating it, it changes our entire sequence.
Well, I took AP U.S. history, so that's why I said my freshman year I took U.S. history. My sophomore year I took world history, and then I went back and took AP U.S. history.
Yeah.
But the students that did not take AP U.S. history, they were able to take psychology, as an elective. They were able to take, that junior year was open for psychology. Some students did that. Some other students did career explorations in American society, which was an elective where they can explore different careers as a doctor, chief financial officer, teachers. So that kind of gave some wiggle room that junior year for juniors to really, take a step out of social studies if they wanted to dive into electives, and senior year come back to, before you leave high school, let's talk about economics and American government. And that was very beneficial. So that was very helpful. I don't understand why we just don't follow something like that, or open it up for more electives that way, do the sequence that way, where freshmen are taking U.S. history, sophomores are taking, the core area again, and then junior year that elective. I don't know, but that's just the way I did it in high school.
Yeah.
That was my experience, and that's very individual, so.
Yeah, and I can share with you, so going into next year, so if, for example, the board were to say we are not in support of removal of economics, we want to maintain it as a requirement, our team's recommendation at that point would be that we remain status quo. So we would keep economics as a requirement, we would keep world history as a semester requirement, and what we would do at that point is really look to Waukesha West, who has implemented a model with both their teachers and their counselors to really increase their students' enrollment in that world history course. They're sitting at 134 of their sophomores are scheduled to take the year-long world history course next year. Only 25 students have elected to take this semester course. And so if the board is more in favor of keeping econ, our recommendation would be to stay status quo and move to a model where we try and emulate what Waukesha West has built in terms of how they inform students to make that selection, how their counselors work with teachers to make that, their parents and families to make that selection. And then additionally, as I stated earlier, our elective areas are on the docket for revision next year. So this year we did our core required areas, so human geo, world history and U.S. history. Next year, we are tackling econ, gov, and then our electives. And we have a team of teachers, we met with them, who have some great suggestions, some of which you've mentioned, like can we explore some other courses? We've really, in social studies, had, when you look at these electives, the same electives offered for a really long time. And so we are looking at what would it look like to offer more, not more, because we don't want a list of 15, but what would it look like to revamp, to update, and that will be taking place next year.
If I could just add one thing to that, we were, discussing how having students being in that, that year-long social studies course with, disciplinary literacy that takes place in there, how that could be advantageous for our students in creating better readers, writers, and of course that's going to have implications on standardized tests as well. I am the one at West who teaches the semester-long course. I also teach the year-long course. And what I can say from that experience is that, for my SLO, I'm going to be meeting with my administrator about that on Thursday. We were working on having the students write summaries and accurate summaries, well-written summaries. And as we go through that process, I'll have a student, by the time we get to the end of semester 1, they're at a certain place. Maybe they're just a little below grade level. And I've got another semester to work with them in social studies. If that student leaves me, though, and goes and takes another class where they're not working on those skills, not that it's a bad class, but that's not necessarily going to, if we're concerned about test scores, that's not necessarily going to be what gets us to higher test scores. So I think that while there are trade-offs, I think that having students enrolled as freshmen and sophomores in all of the core classes is going to give them those reps that they need to be scoring where we want them to score on reading and writing assessments, whether they be standardized or not. Thank you.
Mr. Como?
Yeah, thank you. I truly respect you guys going at this again and really digging deep. And, Rich, I've known you for a long time. Both my kids have had you. I have such respect for the work that you do. Kids are excited to sign up for your class. You're there, I want Mr. Murtis. You're one of those kinds of teachers that kids will talk about for years to come. It's probably one of the favorites. And I share that with my colleagues because I am comfortable with the recommendation, but I know that not everyone is. And I really think that what you've presented here has had a tremendous amount of thought. You have very good supporting evidence as to why you want to go about doing this. And we do have, I think, some pressures and some things to consider with respect to keeping economics around. And I know that in your opening statement, Rachel, you had said, you wanted to stick to the 3.5 credits to give flexibility to our students, more choice to our students, so it's another half of an elective to be able to choose something else that they're very interested in. But I'm really interested in the conversation around why not asking the board to go to 4 credits being required. I want to understand that because I think that could be potentially the thing that we could consider. And we haven't talked as much on that, but I know your team has. So why not 4 credit in your 4 credits for social studies required for graduation?
Yep.
In the recommendation here?
Yeah, so I'm gonna speak, and then I'm gonna have Dr. Cook speak, because we talked a little bit about this together. So I guess first and foremost, we look at what does the state require in terms of what we have to deliver on. The state requires 3 credits of social studies, and so we're currently above the state requirement. We look at any time that we put an additional requirement onto a student, right, we're taking away something that they choose from. Lots of our teachers, again, our social studies teachers, when we said, do you want to explore 4 credits, like hip, hip, hooray. They're like into it, yes, let's do it. And then when you talk to Dan Paczynski, who's my math coordinator, and I say, hey, so we're going to look at 4 credits of social studies, he says, can we talk about math, please? Because our math achievement isn't, rocking, and why would we not require 4 credits of math then? And then I've got Erica Yass, who says, can we talk about science? Why are we not requiring, what warrants social studies content to be that much more important than some of these other core areas? Additionally, we pulled behavior data, and our behavior referral data from our required courses far surpasses behavioral referral data that comes from courses that students elect to be in. That shouldn't probably come as a surprise to anybody, but again, the more that we require, the more we risk, right, students not being necessarily engaged. We talked with our students who are serviced with IEP, so we brought in our special education chairs and had conversation with them about adding additional graduation requirements. We looked at our competency-based diplomas and how many of those we are continuing to administer, which is students who can't meet the current graduation requirements. And then lastly, we did a graduation credit audit, I would say, and Dr. Cook can speak to that perhaps if I don't do it accurately, but we looked at the graduation requirements across surrounding districts, both locally as well as within the Wisconsin area. Is that accurate? And we are right in the middle in terms of our current graduation requirements. And so while a half a credit doesn't seem like a large increase for some of our students who are already borderline at risk of graduation, or again, looking at competency diplomas or not engaged with school, that half credit can really make or break. And so what we hear from our community quite often, what we hear from parents quite often is, I know what is best for my child. And so as a team, we really felt comfortable that if we are transparent, which we have been, we have posted all of our syllabus in terms of course documents, what is included in a course on not only Blackboard, but it's now posted on our school website. Again, talking to our counselors about, do we have avenues for parents to be informed about the decisions that they are making for their children? If the resounding line is, as a parent, I know what is best for my child, we felt very strongly that we were okay saying, as a parent, you can choose. Without upping the graduation requirement, we can say, parent, you choose. Econ, personal finance, both. AP Econ, personal finance, AP Psych, right? You choose. But to meet the personal finance state statute in our district, you got to do one of the three. AP Econ, or personal finance. And parents who know their child best, you can pick. And we felt comfortable with that because we trust, just like we expect our families to trust, right, that we're doing what's best for kids. We want to view that as a partnership that we trust that you, as parents, can make informed decisions about that course sequence for your kids.
I appreciate you taking us through that. There's a lot there.
Yes.
And in your opening statement, it was just a sentence. And I was just, I needed to hear that. I needed to hear how you came to this point, because we've been going through this for a while, trying to figure out what is really best. And I have a tendency to, I'm looking at people that I've known for a long time, and you guys are the experts, and I put a lot of trust in administration, and some people think that's a strength, others think that that's not a strength, okay? But I appreciate how you guys have hit this seriously and how you talked about whether or not that extra half credit should be required.
Mr. Moore.
Again, going back to what I was saying about the course sequence, I'm not understanding why human geography is required. I'm not trying to be like, mean about it. I'm not understanding why. The reason why we have 3.5 is because human geography. If we go, like this one teacher here, I agree with him in terms of, 9th and 10th graders needing social studies because it correlates with literacy. I agree with that. But again, I don't understand the course sequence on why we can't make freshmen take U.S. history, sophomores take world history, junior year, leave it open. If you go back to the course sequence on the screen, please, leave it open that junior year for those students to take those electives. So again, you got the 1 credit for U.S. history their freshman year. You got the 2nd credit, and I'm a teacher myself, so I'm very familiar with this. You got the 2nd credit the sophomore year. And in the 3rd year, you give them, the students, the electives, whether they want to take psychology, like I mentioned about my experience, or they want to take, intro to criminal justice. They have an option to take those electives junior year Or they can take personal finance that junior year as an elective. Then you come back senior year and say, the third year that's required of economics and American government. You would have met that 3 credit mark. Does that make sense? You would have met that, out of the 3 years, freshman year, sophomore year, and senior year. And that junior year, you're leaving it open for those students to take those social studies electives if they choose to. But they would have met 2 things here. They would have met the literacy correlation, like he mentioned, for 9th and 10th grade. And then they would have took a break junior year, got into those electives, whether it's career exploration, criminal justice, psychology, and then senior year coming back to economics and American government. I don't understand why we can't do it that way. We would have met the 3 requirements. Or they can take human geography their junior year as an elective, if that's an option.
So the three main reasons that we do not view that option as favorable are, one, is that we have students right now who, by keeping our AP Human Geography, which again is offered at the freshman level and is a fantastic entry-level course for students who want to take an AP course, by keeping the content area course in alignment with its AP offering. So to your point, 10th grade is world history, that's when 10th grade AP world history is. 11th grade AP US history is when 11th grade regular US history is. When we do that, it drastically reduces if we don't do that, it drastically reduces the opportunities to move tracks. We have students, and the teachers can speak to this, who every year within the first 3 weeks of school move up and move down. So you're a student who you 100% belong in that AP track. You can 100% stretch yourself. We're going to talk to you about this. They slide right up. The content in those courses is not drastically different. It's the pacing, it's some of the level of rigor within the courses that looks different. And so that's that last bullet, which again, we view unfavorably when we change the course sequence. Right now, we have teachers, again, like Rich Murtis, who are teaching both the AP and the non-AP course. When we do that, these teachers are much more readily able to collaborate around standards, around skills, without looking at drastically different content. If I'm a 9th grade team, which next year we have prioritized already in our schedule, that all of our 9th grade human geography teachers will have a common prep once a week, minimally. All of our 10th grade world history teachers will have a common prep. All of our 11th grade teachers will have a common prep. If Chris is teaching AP Human Geography, and Rich is teaching 9th grade, now it turns into US History, we're not collaborating on the same stuff. And that drastically, again, in our opinion, reduces the efficacy we have as teachers, because there's great power when we come together to talk about that. And then lastly, why the option is not favorable to us to remove Human Geography is that middle bullet, which is when we looked at districts that don't offer the regular track, which is all but Elmbrook. Elmbrook offers the regular track of human geography. Everyone else that we talked to does not. We uncovered that there were significantly lower numbers of students enrolled in AP classes. And because the district has identified as a key performance indicator enrollment in AP courses as something that they value, we felt that it was not favorable to remove a course that would impact the enrollment of students in those courses.
Thank you for the clarification. And just to my follow-up question, I wouldn't say, I guess it could be a common or question. I grew up in, poverty in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, so welfare and, government assistance in low-income project homes, all of that. And I think that the world that we're living in today, our kids need to, I'm going to be very transparent, they need to understand how money works. I think if they don't understand how money works, then we are setting a generation of kids up to fail. And, poverty is not something that I want any kid to experience when they become adults. I think that, especially right now in our time in our country where inflation is going up, gas is going up, we live in a world where some kids or young people think that they should be entitled to things for free, and that they don't have to work hard for it. I think that should concern all of us as adults. And I think that understanding how money works and how kids should, one day learn how to work hard and go out there and be productive citizens of society, that comes from economics. So I'm not comfortable with removing it. I'm just going to be transparent. But I understand your reasons on why. I want to make that clear as well. So.
It's still there, right? Just to be clear, I mean, it's not removing it.
Yeah, but making it elective.
Just, okay.
Mrs. Kozlowski.
So one of the key things that I talk a lot about is KPIs and data. When I hear us as a district talking about that we are going to alter our curriculum to meet a KPI that we want to measure, our goal as a district is to get our kids academically proficient in key fundamental subjects. I'd love to get as many kids in an AP class. I mean, I've had 3 daughters that have gone through it. I love the programs, I love the teachers, but that's the wrong way for us to be looking at this. It is a great KPI at the right levels and at the right metrics, but it's not the way that I'm going to drive our curriculum to make sure that we are pushing that versus saying, I need to make sure that we are meeting our kids, every single one, where they're at to help them so that their futures, that they can succeed, whichever, college, trades, wherever that is. Without economics, that's just, we're putting them at risk. That's my last comment.
Mr. Como.
Do you think trying to go and increase AP participation is a good KPI for this board? Yeah, I'm putting you on a spot here.
Yes, you are.
Okay, but
yeah.
this is...
So the research surrounding students who take advanced placement courses is pretty significant in terms of their development of college and career readiness. And it's not necessarily because of just the content that they're learning, but it's because of the skills that a lot of our students are required to demonstrate when they take an advanced level college class. They are forced to demonstrate advocacy. They are forced to demonstrate questioning, critical thinking, study habits, which we know is something that for many of our students when they leave us and go on to college and or career, that time management is crucial. And so I think it's most certainly something that is worthwhile to monitor, to measure, because again, the significance of students who are pushing themselves in those classes and the benefit that comes from when students push themselves in those classes is monumental. And that's probably an understatement. And again, I would direct to Mr. Murtis, who's been teaching the course. I think every student should take minimally one AP class before they leave high school. There's huge value in that, huge.
So even those who aren't going to college, those who want to go right into the workforce, those who might want to go to a 2-year college or go into the military, you see value in the AP courses, even though they'll never go to college.
I do.
Yeah. Rich or Chris, would you like to comment on that also?
Yeah, I think my concern or my issue, I think, as I'm listening to the conversation and kind of where I see this going is my fear is that if we undo the sequence that maintains this alignment of courses, human geo, history, U.S. history by grade level, my fear is that we're going to end up tracking kids. And effectively, students are going to the middle of their 8th grade year choose a path that's going to lead to a trajectory for them that's going to direct what courses they take throughout high school. And so
can you give me an example of that? I'm trying to understand that better.
So what that means is you make your selections for what courses you're going to take halfway through 8th grade.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you choose freshman year that you're going to take U.S. history. Mm-hmm. Not sure if I'm going to take that AP Human Geo. I'm going to take U.S. history. All right, well, now you've knocked history out. All right, now, sophomore year, you have the choice. You could take world or you can take AP World. But if you're on that AP track, it kind of steers kids toward the AP choice sophomore year. They do have a choice, but what happens junior year? And if you've already taken U.S. history sophomore year, you've removed any sort of incentive for students to take that AP course that right now we have at South High School 100 to 150 kids per year taking. And you've already taken U.S. history. So that's what I'm worried about. And we have a lot of kids. I have plenty of students who have taken my AP course who are not necessarily college-bound students, who have other ideas of where they're headed, who have intentions of going into the military, who have intentions of doing a 2-year program, who aren't 4-year college-bound students, but who have that experience of having gone through a demanding, rigorous, academic kinds of experience that prepares them for any number of paths in the future. It's a kind of experience that's unique to an AP course that I think serves all of our students. And furthermore, what it does is it levels our kids up, not down. And I'm worried that we're going to level down if we go that other direction. And that's not a comment on econ, by the way. I'm just worried about changing the sequence that's in place right now.
Because that's what we were discussing, yeah.
Yep.
And I guess I would just like to answer the question of should everybody take an AP course? I believe that they should, because I wouldn't be sitting here right now if I hadn't. And I took one my senior year, and I was going to be a police officer all the way through high school. And taking that one course, actually, I was learning the skills. It wasn't even so much like the history content, but I found myself as a student for the first time and began to believe that I could do something at a college level. And that made me decide to go to college and become a teacher. And so I think that we want students to have all of these choices available. And so I think the last thing, at least in my mind, that we want to do is, halfway through 8th grade, we've kind of already sort of half written that narrative. And again, not that a student cannot change that it's not impossible, but what we see in the districts that have that sort of track is we see that there's less students that get the exposure to the AP courses. And we believe that it's important to have increased exposure. We think that that's something that we do here that's actually a really good thing that we should keep doing.
So what kind of feedback do we get from our students who've taken AP courses?
Yeah.
And I want to have an understanding of what that is from the students who are going to college for 4 years versus the ones who are choosing a different path.
So a couple things. I want to add one piece before we tackle that. One is when Rich mentioned the tracking piece, our high school teachers really did dig into that and looked at a variety of scenarios. One of the things that we did talk about, and we talked to our counselors about it as well, is, for example, if a student picked AP Human Geography their freshman year, and we agree as a system that our students need to take U.S. history or AP U.S. history before they graduate, which I think we all agree on, that really sets up, from a counseling perspective, a situation where now I've got a junior section of perhaps U.S. history, so students who decide they don't want to remain on that AP track, I want to go back and take that 9th grade level U.S. history class, or vice versa, right? I've got, it just creates some messiness that they would have to account for. And again, in the districts that we spoke to, they talked about, yes, we can navigate it and it's manageable, but it does create some messiness for the, 50-some students who decide that they don't want to stay on that AP track for their high school experience. To address your question in terms of student feedback, I would encourage all of you, if you have not yet gone into one of our senior Avid elective classes, to talk to those students about their experiences. All of our senior Avid elective students have taken AP courses and can talk to you about how they have transformed their perception of themselves. Rich spoke a little bit about this, but I think that's something that when you talk to students last year, I don't know if you remember, you watched a video of some former students, some of you did, watched a video of some former students talking about the AP 11 textbook. And they were seniors talking about their experiences from that AP 11 course. And it was a literature course. And again, for most students, like, they're not loving life talking about literature in 12th grade as seniors about to exit into the, right, college or workforce. And those students were talking about it. They were remembering it. They were speaking to what they learned in the course. Those AP courses, when you walk into the room, those students generally feel like a family. And why that is because of the level of demand. They have to rely on each other. There are study groups. I have not met one AP teacher who in the month of May is not meeting before school, after school, or during lunch with the students in their classes. And those students come in voluntarily, sometimes on Sundays. Some of you might remember a teacher named Fred Jonas. He was a legend at Waukesha West. And he would get students to come in all the time, and because they viewed themselves as a family going through this incredibly, again, rigorous experience. It's a college level class taught at the high school. There's a sense of pride that comes with that. There's a sense of, right, I can do this. And so, I would encourage any of you to talk to students. I don't want to speak for them, but I can tell you I've talked to many of them, and it's a positive thing. It's hard, but it's positive.
Thank you. Mr. Moore.
I just want to say thank you for clarifying why the sequence needs to be that way, and that makes sense. So I'm totally fine with that. And again, I keep saying Dr. Como, Mr. Como mentioned that you are the experts, and I understand that completely as well. But I think sometimes my convictions can equate to passion, because my favorite social studies teacher was my economics teacher. Mrs. Kpis, and she actually helped me understanding on how to be a productive citizen of society. I don't think I would have got anything else out of high school except in that class on how to make sure that I got my first job. I understand how supply and demand works. I understand how money works. I understand that nothing should be given to me for free because of my race or my background, right? I had to learn how to, work hard. And it made me realize, like, oh snap, I'm in the United States of America. I need to make sure I'm being productive, and if I want success, I can get it just through hard work. So she taught me those things in economics, and when I look at our children, but I was required to take it, right? It was forced upon me, and I don't think giving children sometimes when I'm not that far out of high school, and I look back at some of the choices that I made in high school, like, was those the right choices, right? And I think sometimes, children don't always make the best decisions for themselves in terms of even in high school. And I can attest to that. I'm not that far out of high school. I keep saying that. I made tons of mistakes in high school. Like, maybe I shouldn't have did this, maybe I shouldn't have did that. But when it comes to taking classes, those things were set up for me, just like how you all set up the sequence for a reason, so that kids don't make the wrong mistakes. And I think that putting it in their hands or the family's hands, some children don't even have parents to make that decision, right? They go home to foster homes and group homes. So those are children that get forgot about. So, I think that, having high school students decide whether they should take economics or not, I'm just wrestling with that. So please excuse my passion, but I'm wrestling with that. So
No, I can appreciate that. And again, I would be happy to, our scheduling process in terms of how students pick classes, it's definitely something that is collaborative in nature. All of our juniors, which is when most students head into this strand of, again, electives, have what's called a junior conference. It's mandated by in all of our schools. And so every student, whether they are experiencing hardship outside of their life or not, has that conference where they are walking through what are your plans for post-secondary, what courses do make the most sense for you to take. Many of our families say it's like the most informative conference that they have, and so that's when, we're not asking a 16-year-old to, pick some boxes and decide for themselves. We really are doing it in a very informed, strategic way through, like I said, the junior conferences is one example. Our social studies teachers also guide the students in what makes the most sense. We have parent information nights, so there's multiple avenues for people to make informed decisions.
Mr. Zenobia.
Thank you. It seems to me that this entire discussion over the last few months has been we're bending over backwards to eliminate economics to pick up world history for a full credit. So we're replacing one with the other. If we were to go to 4 credits, my wish would be that we'd pick up personal finance, keep economics, and eliminate human growth, and then pick up the half-credit world history. It sounds to me like U.S. history and world history are more rigorous courses. So I can, I don't know if that's fair, but I can appreciate human geography being available as an option for those that don't want the more rigorous path. If we're going to provide a choice, why not provide that choice between human growth and world history? If a student were to take human growth, human geography, I'm very sorry.
Next year.
Human geography.
Emails are coming in.
My apologies. Must be on the mind, I don't know. So if we are going to have a choice in those courses, and if a student wanted to take human geography for the full semester and get credit for that, or they wanted to take world history for the full credit, why not give them an option in the middle of having one of those semesters or half a year as a half credit, as an elective? Why does the choice have to be between economics, personal finance? It's a unique area that the students can't get anywhere else in the social studies. I mean, I know we're saying that it's infused in history, and, yeah, that's true, but all of the social studies touch one another. So it's all there. You can emphasize one thing over another. But I think we're losing something of value there. And these are all questions, I guess, in a roundabout way. I think they've been answered for the most part, but the final thing is the literacy part. And the argument has been that our students are needing human geography and the other history courses for that literacy piece. But why couldn't you pick that up in any course offered the freshman, sophomore year in social studies? I mean, there's plenty there to read. So I don't know why that is the driving argument, other than the fact that we are sensitive to literacy being an issue. And my final thought on this, just wrap it up, is I believe we took a vote on this 2 months ago, and the board had said no to this specific proposal. And whether that vote was more a deferment until now, excuse me, whether we were really deferring that until now or just trying to get this right for the sake of all the work that's gone into it and all of the feedback from the teachers and trying to find the right blend, it is fine. But my opinion hasn't changed. I don't know if the rest of the board has. I do think economics is something that we cannot sacrifice. If we're going to pick up a credit anywhere, I would say, have a credit anywhere, I'd say personal finance, and make these other courses, which we already have, either credit courses or elective courses, and pick up that half a credit in the middle there for whatever that student decides. It does give them some choice. They could still take the track that we've been talking about. It just wouldn't all be counted as required, and they'd still get their 3.5. So that's where I'm at, and those were more comments, questions, ideas, so feel free. Thank you.
Could I just clarify one of Anthony's questions first? The question related to the vote that we took at the April board meeting. I did talk about this with Ms. Landish. So for a failed motion, could come back as many times as they want to try to bring it back. Might not be advisable if people are tired of, answering the question, but, given the change in the members, they wanted to bring this back. And it is maybe unique because it's the exact same motion that was made. But I just wanted to clarify that it would be Mr. Como.
So the literacy concerns that we have for our freshmen, can that be met in econ and personal finance? So let's say you had a year, half econ, half personal finance. You could make that choice, and I'm not a pro at this, okay? I'm just trying to find a solution. Or allow people to go down the human geography route that freshman year. I just don't know if you can really do the literacy portion with econ and personal finance combined into one year.
Okay, so respect to the team in front of you, and I'm certainly not waving a white flag in this comment, however. What the team is not going to compromise on is the course sequence. So if the board votes the motion down, all respect due, then we can still have the course sequence that meets the needs of all students, in our opinion, and teachers. Not ideal, because our ideal is the recommendation, but again, if the board votes it down, what we will do in our most strategic move in our action step will be that sophomore year, as Mrs. Herman mentioned. We're going to really coach our counselors in the scheduling process to try to ensure, as she mentioned, the West model, that we get the majority of students in that year-long sophomore year. So again, I respect everyone's ideas about a different course sequence, but I think you heard loud and clear what we don't want to compromise is that sequence. So we would keep the status quo and go from there in our decision-making.
That's fair. I just had to toss it out. I'm trying to solve a problem, and
Absolutely.
I didn't know if it was going to stick or not. I didn't think it would, but why not give it a whirl?
Absolutely.
From my perspective, you all have exhausted every single possibility that we could consider. I know that even Mr. Como brought up tonight, and we talked about this before, the 4-credit option. The way I see where we're at right now, if we include West, South, portion of South, and all of our AP track kids, we already have more than half of our students are already in the 4-credit track. And if there's work that's being done at North to bring that option forward, I think that we will see a vast majority of our students that are in that 4-credit track. And that seems to give you all the human geography step that you're very passionate about. It keeps economics in the curriculum. I do understand Dr. Cook's points about not wanting to compromise a lot of the electives. I think as we go and look at some of these electives, especially as we talk about health and some of the other areas, that we may actually find room to create capacity for some of these things going forward. So given what's potentially coming back around at the state assembly level, given the upcoming conversations about electives, given all the work that you've done to try to reconcile all of this and the many, many, many hours of conversations we've had, I think the alternative to this proposal is that we will continue to have a year-long world history push for even more students in the district, and I think that's the number one priority, is getting more students into that year-long world history. So it's not a horrible compromise. Mr. Como.
So 2 months ago, I was one of the people who was not in favor of this, and I appreciate all the work that you guys have put forth. And I'm going to actually move to approve the Social Studies High School course sequence as recommended.
Is there a second?
So I've changed my mind, I guess is what I'm saying.
So with no second, we won't be able to take a vote on that motion. Just one last chance. So unfortunately, we have no second. So that would mean that if it doesn't fail, there's no motion made, so.
So we will remain status quo. We will not be back to talk about this with you next month. But if you have any questions, obviously, please feel free to reach out. So I'm going to stay up here because I'm up next, but thank you. Rich.
Thank you.
We do appreciate all of your work, Rachel and the team.
Oh, Chris, you're staying.
I'm staying.
You're
Oh.
TCI.
Oh,
Sorry.
that's right, TCI, I'm on both
Sorry.
teams. That's okay.
Thank you.
So I will say, as our first time around, I do like the content area focus of the agenda because we move right into the middle school social studies conversation. And I think we'll revisit some of the topics that actually came up over the last hour or so.
All right. Let me just pull up the other presentation. All right, so I have with me now some more amazing teachers in our system. So I have Jess Natter, who is a middle school social studies teacher. I have Lisa Murkowski, who is also a middle school social studies and business teacher. She does it all. You've already met Chris, and then I have Joey Kovaneski, who is a middle school social studies teacher as well. And so we are here to introduce to you TCI. Hopefully you all were able to get access to our online resource using the board information that we presented in that packet, and we're here to answer any questions that you have. Again, we're just here to introduce it. We'll be back in July to discuss it more in depth, and then our goal is coming back in August with an action item for you to hopefully allow us to move forward with this as our recommended resource so that we can begin to plan and implement it in the 22-23 school year.
Would anyone like to get us kicked off with questions or comments?
The big stack. Thank you.
Mrs. Kozlowski.
So, a couple things. Who was piloting this program?
6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th, and 11th. So
All this past year?
All this past year, at various times. So they were not all in the pilot at the same time, but all of them participated in the pilot. So these were the 3 resources that we ended up piloting, and TCI was the one that was viewed most favorably.
And what's the feedback on why it was more favorable?
I can speak.
I'll give you TCI's strongest advocate that we're trying to convince not to go work for TCI. He loves it so much.
So I have tried all 3 resources this year with my 6th graders, and TCI I found to be the most engaging and the most kind of to the point, so to speak. So my Savas and McGraw-Hill, the other 2 resources we considered, they're very your traditional textbook that looked familiar to me from when I was in school, that most likely looked familiar to when you were in school. It's very dry, very just bulky sections, very broad scope of information that's kind of unnecessary to hitting the essential question that we're hitting. TCI really breaks it down on a subsection level. So for example, in world history, or in our ancient Rome unit right now, so one of our lessons is solely focused on just the daily life of a Roman citizen. So we have our specific sections geared to that, and it's really hitting to the point. What I like about it too is that on the teacher end with the planning, McGraw-Hill and Savas, it was pretty much, here's the book, here's a worksheet that you can do with the chapter, with the lesson. What TCI offers, they offer fully planned lessons that go with this, including engaging activities that are hitting on literacy skills, that are hitting on strategies that we're teaching. So, for example, with that daily life in the Rome unit, TCI suggested teaching this using a stations model. So my students went through different stations to learn about the different aspects of daily life. So again, common, the other teachers who are piloting TCI, they're following that lesson guide. They're following that same strategy. So students are hitting on these same strategies and skills throughout the units, throughout the lessons. It's not up to the individual teachers to be deciding, okay, I'm going to teach this lesson using this strategy, this lesson with this strategy. It's really common across TCI and planned out for you.
So we got the books.
Yes.
And is the instruction for the students, it's all digital? Is that, or are they going to be using the books?
So both and. I want to add one more thing before I answer that question. The student feedback around the other two resources was night and day different from TCI. We started calling TCI because we're old, the Facebook platform, because it required for the students basically zero training on what to click, kind of like when you first started on Facebook, right? You didn't need somebody to teach you where's the like button and how do I comment, right? You picked it up like that. That was how TCI was for both teachers and students. They raved about the feedback in terms of how accessible it was. Whereas the other two, when Joey talked a little bit about the dryness of the text, I think Jess was the group that Jess had an entire class who said to her during one of the units, "Can we please stop reading this? It is so boring." And she stopped, right? She's not going to continue. But it was just resounding feedback from the students that this was the resource that was most engaging to them. To your question then about the online versus digital, so we will purchase, they all have a digital ebook, it mimics what you have here. That is what 99% of our students will use. They will also, though, in each site have a text set of hard copies for students who, for whatever the reason, I have a concussion and I can't access my iPad for 2 weeks, or I don't have an iPad, or we have students who have IEPs who need print support. So we purchase a text set for students who can't access the online version, so that we can be as accommodating as possible.
Thank you.
Yep.
I have a couple of questions. Thank you. And I, in fact, have a sixth grader who was involved in these pilots, so I got a little bit of insider information. Who literally, when I was going through some of my paperwork, said, "Oh, we have TCI." So as I looked through it, especially the digital content, again, I love the vocabulary pieces. I liked how it kind of was easy to navigate. There were some inconsistencies for me between what was in the books and what was online. One of the things I noted in particular, and I will spend more time with the world unit, there's some bias there that is really going to depend on how the teacher is presenting it, like everything else we talk about, right? There's a lot of focus on energy dependency, and depending on how that's brought into the conversation, we have our controversial topics guidance, right? These are not things that are necessarily scientific in nature. They are perspective. So some of that global perspectives, I think, very much depends on the delivery. There was a reference to, in the future, in the 2020s, this will happen. I was concerned that maybe there was some gap in kind of the text material being up to date, but I didn't look for that same problem in the digital version. On the digital version, I had a little bit of the same concerns that I have then with StudySync and Newsela, which is there's new content coming, which was nice. There were actually some excerpts and things that they could read that were more up to date. But then I want to just kind of verify how we're going to control that content to make sure that it's appropriate and that students are also getting, regardless of what school they're in or what house they're in, that their social studies experience is similar.
Yeah.
So I know that was really packed with a whole bunch of concerns and opportunities, but what I'm hearing and seeing looks great, but there are these things that kind of popped out at me, like how are we going to handle these in the classroom, and what does this look like, for consistency's sake?
So I just want to share in terms of the updates that you're referencing, because that does look a little different. So the sixth grade textbook there is an updated version being released in August. Our teachers have gotten to see it, and we've gotten snippets because the rep knows that we are in love with TCI. However, we are not allowed to release it to anybody else. We have been able to see the table of contents, the units of study, and they align really, really nicely to what currently exists. So we're not purchasing a brand new resource. The biggest difference is that the current sixth grade version, if you look at the new versions, you'll see that they have how to approach TCI using the TCI framework, like you start with a compelling question and then you go. You can tell it's an older version if it doesn't have that. All of their newer versions will have that, and that's the inquiry design model. And so in this August, sixth grade will be updated. And so again, it's not different content, it's just they're aligning it to the TCI approach. The other piece to note in terms of updates that might look different is in eighth grade, the US through modern times, they are no longer updating. So they are US through industrialism. Their philosophy is that students really, and Jess as an eighth grade teacher, the line is always like, I'm happy if I can get to 9/11 by the time that I'm done with US history, because we start with pre-colonialism and it's a lot of history to get through. And so TCI's approach is that we go deeper into these big topics and go a little bit slower and connect it to present day, connect it to some 20th century history, but we go really deep. We will still, in talking to the rep, have access to this and be able to use this because there's good stuff here. But that also is being updated. TCI, I think I said this in my presentation, only does social studies. That's it. And so their level and what the team noticed when we were looking at like the primary sources used, it was unlike anything else that we saw. And I think that's because they only do social studies. So they are updating frequently, but what they're presenting to us is really, we think, quality. And when those things are updated, we most certainly have no issue in coming back to the board to say, here's an updated version to make sure that you are, okay with those materials as they get updated.
And speaking to that a little bit as well, something I really appreciate about TCI compared with some of the other resources we've looked at and considered is the essential questions really allow for students to formulate their own arguments, their own opinions about history. So for example, in our Rome unit right now, one of the essential questions they're working with is to what extent did Rome influence the modern world? So think of how many different approaches you could take to that. So we're presenting the students the content with that, but they're coming up with it. They could turn around and say that Rome did not influence us in the modern world, and that's totally fine as long as they're able to support and back up that argument. But I found that the essential questions really are not biased in that nature and are really allowing students to formulate their own arguments.
Any other questions or comments about the books?
I just had probably a clarifying question. And maybe I'm reading this wrong from one of the slides. It was talking about the ninth grade and how they struggled to find a resource. Is this the resource they found, or is that the human geography that's going to remain? So we're not going to use this for ninth grade?
Correct. So TCI produces one textbook resource for geography, and it's called Geography Alive, so it's this one. And very similar to textbook companies, right? So you guys, in the last presentation, we talked about how U.S. history, right, in some districts is offered in ninth grade and in other districts is offered in 11th grade. A lot of textbook vendors will write their textbooks so that they can be taught at multiple ages. So Geography Alive is currently a book that when we first piloted, the reps talked to us about it could be used in ninth grade and it could be used in 7th grade. And we had some questions about that, but we said, okay, let's pilot, let's see what that looks like. And after piloting, we realized it's not nearly rigorous enough for our 9th grade, and it doesn't totally align to the human geography. It's much more world geography centered. And so we made the decision to place it in 7th grade, where TCI most recommends it. For 9th grade then, that left us with, we piloted the two other resources, both of which again were just not favorable. And so we looked at the AP Human Geography book that has already been board approved. And we said, is this something that's feasible for us to use with students who are in the regular level human geography class? Is it the text that makes it AP, or is it the way in which we use the text, the demands that we place on the students in the class that make it AP? And we decided it was the latter, that it's what we ask students to do with the text, the pacing that we take within the text that makes it appropriate for AP. And so we have decided to take that text and use it as a resource to support our regular human geography students. And again, it was viewed very favorably. The readability, for those of you that were on the board when that was approved, it was really a solid textbook. Its readability scores were very high by students, the visuals, the graphics, the supports, the scaffold. So we felt very comfortable with moving forward with that as our resource to support regular human geography and AP.
Just to follow up to that, so that was more of the text they provide is more of a world geography.
Correct.
As opposed to what?
Yeah,
we
there's
have in
some
ninth grade.
aspects of human geography, but not nearly as heavy as what our course currently emphasizes.
Okay. And we're not going to use it in 7th grade?
We're going to use this
That book
in 7th grade.
Oh, okay, okay. Thank you.
So the human geography text, it's pretty heavy. Would we be bringing that back then to get approval to use it, the AP book to use in regular human geography, or?
We haven't typically, when something has already been approved by our board, we haven't typically brought it back for reapproval. That would be something that we could talk with you all about.
Phase 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, so as we reconstruct the syllabus in Phase 2, we would bring the syllabus back for your consideration.
Okay. Because, I mean, and I don't need the answer right now. I had reached out to Rachel about just some of the cost considerations, right? We're buying TCI as a package. It's all inclusive across those grades. We would need to consider what the costs are associated with then bringing the AP text to the entire 9th grade, right?
Yeah, so the cost differential, so this is the only book TCI offers within its 612 sequence to support a geography course. And so we would be looking at either, our option A was like you use it in both 7th grade and 9th grade, which we were not in favor of. And so then option B was where does it best align, which we said it aligns in middle school. And so the suite that you purchase when we buy TCI only comes with this one. So the purchase for our AP Human Geography text, we were looking at, when we add those licenses, we were looking, thank you, that's the wrong presentation, thank you. We are looking at about $87,000. It's about $135 per student for each license. But again, we would have to do that regardless because it doesn't come. Correct. I have a lot going on up here.
Any other comments or questions? Well, as I learned all about the Enrollment expansion this morning.
It's $153 per student, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's more, okay. Okay. I do see that a lot of other districts have incorporated TCI. Seems like something that, at least at first glance, meets the needs that you have. I would like to maybe just, and it is something that we can talk about, whether or not that AP, or I'm sorry, whether that AP translates, and what that looks like, what other alternatives would be there. Certainly if we're still kind of unresolved on what the future state of the high school social studies curriculum might look like, it might make sense not to buy another book. But I think we have to talk about the world history text as well, right?
We will be looking at an AP World History text for next year.
Okay.
That is, we are due for purchase on that. We can look at a one-year license. So if we go with a one-year license for the AP Human Geography book, it's $50 per student per year. If we go with a 6-year license, it's $153. And those are our only two options. They don't do a 3-year option, which is really probably most ideal based on our curricular revision. But again, our team did, we scoured, I mean, we looked through National Geographic, we looked at Houghton Mifflin, we looked at every vendor out there for a resource that would support that regular level human geography, and we just kept coming back to the AP resource. And quite honestly, it's for the reasons that many of you have identified. Most districts don't offer a regular level human geography. It is not usually a course that's differentiated that way.
So this resource in particular will meet the needs of our regular world history and U.S. history?
Correct. Correct. And with the suite that you purchase, it's also probably worth noting that from a teacher perspective, when they go to implement, because of the way the suite works, they will actually have access to the econ textbook as well as the government textbook from a teaching perspective. If we want to enroll students into that, there's an additional cost. And so again, as we look to plan for our electives next year, we'll explore that. But as we talk about our teachers, again, integrating economic standards and really getting good at that, they have 2 textbooks that really support that work that come right along with the suite as part of that purchase.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay.
So the teacher team will be back next week with specific examples, again, as a discussion item. If there's anything that you want really specifically for them to answer, I know, Dr. Piasek, you mentioned some specific units that, you know, if you want us to really address those in either our presentation beforehand, please let me know.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would expect that when we get more time through that, and I will try to reach out to Jody with some of the stuff. I've only been through 2 of them so far.
Yep, perfect.
And so just making sure that we can give you guys more time.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And thank you all for being here. I didn't say this to the previous groups, but obviously being the last couple days of school, I know there's a lot going on. So thank you very much for being here.
Great team.
Thank you.
All right. The last item on our agenda is a discussion of our KPIs, and maybe I'll just preface this briefly. As we were talking about kind of resetting for KPIs for this year, we thought it would make sense to take the KPIs that were relevant to each respective committee and kind of send them back to committee for discussion and review, and then we'll pull those back together to the full board in August to finalize the KPIs for the year going forward. So last year was the first time that we had this full set. We're getting comfortable with them, and I think at this point they're up for some revisions and discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Piasek, for setting that up for me. So I guess what you don't have is the original version in front of you, but there were just a few tweaks. If I want to make an overall statement, am I supposed to project now? Or, yeah, okay. There were a few tweaks to the indicators under teaching and learning, and the most visible one is the map data. So you can see we basically took out the map data indicators as the first 2 indicators and infused them in with just the percent proficient on the forward test. So we feel better about that. We like the asset-based language, and at the end of the day, it is the way they perform. Our students perform on the state test in terms of their levels of proficiency. Oh, thank you. In ELA and math. So that we kind of infuse those 2 map indicators into the percent proficient on the forward. But if I take you through just in general, are you doing that for me? You're so great, Dr. Siebert, thank you. If I take you through, in general, none of the other KPIs have changed. What has gotten more specific is the actual quantifiable numbers that we put on here. And what you need to know is that in our first attempt in putting this draft together for your consideration is we tried to put, we looked at our baseline currently and some of our trends currently. And what we also considered are our top 10 size districts comparables, but we also looked at our neighboring district comparables. Sometimes those are two really big and different worlds, but I needed the board and our community to see those comparables, to see how we're ranked with the top 10 largest districts in the state, of which we're the 7th largest. But I also know the reality of the competitors of our neighboring systems. So the percentages you see there, I think, are a good draft of a happy medium in terms of a 3-year benchmark. That is also what I want to preface, is the percentages listed on there, again, negotiable, question, comment, certainly from you all. That's the purpose of these next few months. The percentages as listed would be our 3-year goals. And we had some discussion, Dr. Piasek and I, about just, are these 3-year markers, are they 5-year markers? We really have set ourselves up as a system to work in shorter cycles of implementation. We have also found that these percentages in shorter cycles and the real time in terms of what we're trying to achieve, our stakeholders, meaning our teachers and our principals, take more ownership with those realistic timelines. So just the first two going over, nothing's changed. We still want to be number one in terms of against our 10 largest districts when you look at the overall score on the DPI report card. We want to hit that 100% of all schools meeting expectations or higher on the report card. The GPA of 2.8 or higher, we're shooting for the 80%. The 80%, just to give some, again, reasoning around the 80% is, if you look at a universal instruction or a response to intervention model, a right-sized model is that you have 80% of your students achieving at a universal level in any given area or subject. And so that is why the 80% was chosen. You can see the baseline at our high schools currently, and there is a drastic difference between one side of town currently than the other. And so that is our work ahead of us, right? We're celebrating at one school, in theory, a high school already meeting the goal, and yet two other high schools that are going to really stretch themselves in that area. Mr. Como?
Does the South data include the academies or not? I don't think it does it?
Did I pair them out or not? That is South, like proper, as we say. So
Okay.
that is according to South's
That's how the state does
report
it.
card, and
Right,
that's how the state does it.
does not allow us to combine those academies into
Correct.
South. Because at one time, we did have them combined for previous reports, but that was a few years ago. So those are all completely separated now.
Correct, and I don't have the academy percentages in there. I just took the 3 general high schools. Let me stop and pause, though, because I don't want to talk too much on that. So just going over the first 3, I guess, again, this is going to be an open forum this month, July, and hopefully we'll get to a point where everyone feels good in August about taking action around these, because then it'll go to the full board for a vote as well. So any input or comments on the first 3?
Go ahead, Carrie.
So the first 2, I struggle with trying to use the DPI report cards a lot. This last year, we know that they changed some of their metrics. I think some of our schools received report cards that were more favorable than I think to the reality, especially when we're talking about student achievement, that I want to have real insight into what we're looking at and not a sugar-coated version of how we're trying to take a look at our student achievement and our performance. The 100% of schools meeting expectations, I love the concept. I don't know how real that is, right? I'd like to take a look, I think, deeper as to what does that all mean, right? I think when I look at the report card, there's 4 categories in there? So there's achievement, growth, diversity.
Oh, the pie.
The pie. I'm just hesitant to use that out there as in only being, is this giving us a feel-good, where when I take a look at actually behind the scenes and behind the numbers on how we're actually doing when it comes to achievement, I would not give us that rating. Just a couple things for that. On the third one, I love the 80%. I think that that's achievable. I think that's a great goal. I think 2.8 is a good number for where I think we can get to. And from my review of metrics, I'd like to see something that is graphical, that how can we see this trend over time?
Oh, yeah.
Right, build it. And I think right now, we're just trying to make sure that we have any idea what that looks like to even build out.
Yeah.
But the first two do cause some hesitation for me as to how do we really rate ourselves,
Okay.
especially from the state, even in comparing ourselves to other districts. I mean, we've all talked at length about just Waukesha is so unique on its own that I'd like to hold Waukesha to higher standards. You know, when we talk about that, our achievement or our literacy is, in line with the state or above, Milwaukee County or others. In all fairness, those numbers are not acceptable. I mean, we should hold our students and our families accountable that we are aiming for 50% plus of proficiency, if not 60%. I mean, I'd love 60 as the number, but I don't know. Again, it's the realistic of what do we think we can achieve, and then wanting our students to know that we expect and have big dreams for them. We expect them to work hard and do all that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that feedback. I took notes on that. I do want to kind of go down.
I'd like to comment on this.
Oh.
On this.
I thought you were going to answer her, but if you're moving on, we'll have Mr. Como comment.
I do want to answer the question about the percent proficiency around the 40, 50, 60%. Is that okay if I do that? Getting to your point, Mrs. Kozlowski, about the percent proficient or higher, we did take, and I have taken that feedback from you before already, we absolutely want to be above the state level. So when you look at our 45% goal in ELA and our math 46%, we currently sit in math as a state at 38.9, and you're absolutely right, we want to be above the state. We currently are looking at our highest competitor and our neighboring competitor at the goal of 64%, and that's New Berlin. So again, we tried to take where we are as a baseline, knowing that 38.9 and kind of that 64, and where could we hit for a reasonable 3-year goal, knowing that that's still going to be quite a feat to get to. So that was our justification around that. Similarly, our first run at the ACT composite last year was that we wanted to be 1 point above the state average, and we actually upped the rigor of the goal in saying we wanted to be 1 point above the national average, because we want our kids to be successful and competitive in a global way. So currently for the ACT, the state average is 20.1 and the national is 21.5. So that would mean Waukesha's composite would have to be 22.5. And again, that fluctuates, but I think that does go to show that we're not afraid of that rigorous expectation, but we also want to be realistic in incremental steps. Yes.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
Mr. Coleman.
Yeah, I do think it's important for us to compare us to other districts in the top 10, because their makeup of their district is more similar to ours, that urban-suburban kind of combination. And I can understand how you get frustrated perhaps with the state changing things, but this particular report it's required. It's what the state has set up. I think we should be looking at it. I don't think we should ignore it. We are also required to report to our constituents on this, and it is posted on our website. And this is how people who are moving from Florida to here can start to get some comparison data to determine if they want to move here. Now, they're going to drive down deeper in the website. So I'm a little concerned about eliminating our comparisons to the top 10 districts.
Yeah, that's not what I'm asking. I'm not asking to eliminate it. I just want us to be cautious about using it as a guiding metric for us, because I think that Waukesha is better or has more work to do than what is initially done on a shell based on what they measure.
Yeah, I understand that. So are you saying that we should just eliminate these two, though?
No, I don't know. I think that because we have to report on them and because it's a state-initiated report, I think that we have to share it. What I'm saying.
You're cautioning how we use it.
I'm cautioning how we use it as a measurement.
Okay, that's fair.
Or reality check.
That's fair. I actually agree with you. Yes.
To me, this is, I guess it's kind of a baked metric in the sense that there's not a whole lot of room for negotiation on what the goal is, right? We know that we should be number one in the top 10, and we should be working toward that. And from my perspective, we know that it's possible that all of our schools can meet or exceed expectations. I mean, the reality with this last round of report cards is that 95% of districts were meeting or exceeding expectations, despite the fact that 38.9% of kids were proficient in English and math. So, we have to look at this number, and I think that's what Mrs. Kozlowski is saying, is that it's kind of necessary. So, and unfortunately, that 100% to me, while it's non-negotiable, it's not met right now. So it does mean that there's room. And so, when I look at it, it's like, gosh, I don't like this goal. It's like, the goal that you have to get up in the morning and go to bed at night. That's kind of a given. But I do think, unfortunately, we have to have it, and it has to be something that we take very seriously, because we're either meeting it or we're not. It's not a percentage of progress here. I think it's very possible for us, and I think it would mean something, even if I disagree with how the report cards get put together, We keep going?
Yeah, and again, just the ones we haven't covered, but we certainly covered in another agenda item, would be the AP courses. We want to continue to increase enrollment. We know that it's the predictability around the rigor, critical reading skills, all the, academic skills, whether or not a student is going to college or not, is highly valuable. And then the percentage, again, earning a B or better in the course. Just for some perspective on that, we currently, it's up there, thank you, Dr. Siebert, on Q, we have 23 courses offered, which is on the high end of most and neighboring districts in our area. We currently, as an average, and this does include eAchieve, have that composite of 76.6% currently achieving that B or better status. Then the last two indicators, and then I'll be done kind of with the overview. The first six are very quantifiable. We have the goals as measured by, we'll be able to see, to Ms. Kozlowski's comment about the graph and the visual, I think it's still, that board is screaming our name, right? It's empty right now. It's a lot of times has beautiful artwork from our students in our schools, but we do want to have a visible dashboard, likely on the website and somewhere also visible, that we could have these indicators up there. They'll be updated readily. Many of these are one-time indicators, so once a year they'll be updated. Some of them will happen, at semester more often with the GPA and things like that, but we do want this to be a visible working document of which you can see all 23 schools and kind of where we sort and sift through that. So the last two indicators would just be reported out as is. The DPI risk ratio, you got a little bit of insight on that. I think it was last month, even though it feels like longer ago. The academic performance and the behavior status of students of color as compared to their white counterparts. We had some good controversy and debate about that. And then the state goal of reading meeting English proficiency in the area of bilingualism would just be, again, reported out as compared to the state goal. So, again, open for continued feedback as we kind of tweak and revise, or things that we need to consider from your perspective.
I'd like to just offer something on the AP bullet point. Again, we spent a lot of time on it already, but while I understand, I've actually seen the data that correlates to kids taking AP courses and really, potentially finishing a four-year college degree, but appreciating, again, that we have plenty that go into the trades. We have plenty that take a different path. I think the appetite for four-year colleges has changed a lot in the last few years. So I'm not sure that what we should be focusing on is just the goal of more, increasing the total number of students enrolled, because that's just saying we want more. But what is the goal? If I think about what the goal is, and I appreciate the B letter grade, but I think it also is important that we have students that are passing the test, that we're having threes that are achieved, and that we could also look at it in terms of college credits earned. Because I do know that in some cases we have problems with some of those AP scores being accepted for some bigger schools, or when the things aren't necessarily aligned to the major. So when I think about why we want kids in the AP courses, it's because we want them to be successful in college, and we want them to learn, not just get the B in the class. And I do struggle sometimes when we've got, I think one of the data points we looked at when we did the KPI on AP classes was 100% of students that take AP Physics 2 get a B or better in the class. But we know how hard that AP exam is, right? So I'm not saying that they should necessarily all be getting Ds, but I think looking at that performance overall is telling us how well we're actually teaching to those standards. And so that, to me, might be more important, the why, not necessarily just more. Mr. Zenobia.
I guess from, hard to even ask this question because it's not really easy to quantify all the students here in some of the ways that we're trying to get them, some of the goals we're trying to meet. To back up, I think the most important point of any goal you set is obviously how do we plan to get there? What do we have to do to get to that goal? Which kind of ties into my question of, to me, it would be in terms of cost. What is the cost that it takes, money or time, resources to get any number of students, say it's 1,000 students, to get their GPA up, half a point or whatever. What are we really talking about as to how we're going to do any of these things? I mean, I know it's the big picture. I know it's probably not something that can be answered right here, but every time you try to get someone to do better, a teacher has to spend more time with them, or we need more resources in an area where maybe we're lacking. What really is it going to take for us to get a large percentage of our students, regardless of any of the other things we talk about, demographics or anything? How do we get those kids to their next level, I guess is the way I'd put it?
Mm-hmm. I'm going to take a stab at that.
It's a huge question. I don't even know how to really ask it, but I guess.
I think I know what you're asking. I'll say a couple things that come to my head, Mr. Zenobia, when you say that. So, first of all, I think we heard tonight that there is a heightened sensitivity around the KPIs. Now, I would agree that's not how we make our curricular decisions. However, this is a newer accountability measure in our system as of last year. And so I will say the district, although every single teacher in the system has their own internal accountability every day with that child in front of them, that's their biggest accountability. And they are working on those levels of high accountability every day. I will say in the formal sense of this written down on paper and having us report out on it and having schools monitor it is a newer accountability for our system. I will say in our sales school improvement processes, that part of their 100-day action planning templates, which means each of our schools have goals that they're working towards, creating professional development and measuring these metrics. These KPIs are pull-downs that they will be measuring and monitoring each month. And they will be choosing in which areas they're going to more hyper-critically focus on as a school, so that, again, they build that whole coalition around the goal. So I think in those ways, it makes it very clear to staff and schools what the expectations are, and there are ways that both schools and district level personnel are monitoring this. So that would be my first response in the teaching and learning. Your question about, financially, what is it going to cost? I mean, I can't give you that.
And I appreciate that. I don't expect you to know that. And really, to me, it's more the resources of a teacher or maybe someone else. That's really where the gains will be made, not necessarily in the dollars we spend, but in the quality that we're able to give each kid, especially those that need it. When we draw down, you said there's a heightened sensitivity toward some of these metrics among staff now. Did I hear that correctly? So will we get some big picture of the feedback they're giving, saying, hey, this is an area where we're lacking. We need help or support here, which we don't have. We think this would improve the outcomes of this class or this grade level or whomever. I mean, how does that information flow up? Because, again, goals are great. If we don't have a way to help you achieve them or focus resources where they need to be, then we're spinning our tires here. So I guess that would be my question.
So how does feedback get to us and flow up? Pretty openly and willingly, both solicited and unsolicited. Very open door with feedback. And I will say, any teacher would attest to the most important thing you can give them to reach any of these goals is, I would say, first and foremost, the guaranteed and viable curriculum to get them there. And secondly, the time to do the needed and necessary work with students. Workload has been sort of a theme over time here, as well as having to curate resources and not the time to do it. I think we are slowly in the area of teaching and learning, and with adopting as many resources as we are, that is the number one thing that we can be doing for teachers right now, as well as being supporters of them and their hard work and giving them the time to do what they are wizards at doing, and that's helping every child reach their best potential.
Good, thank you. I think you answered my question better than you think. I appreciate it.
Are there any other comments or questions about the KPIs? So we'll have this discussion on the July agenda as well for a follow-up.
Yes, and I think just to recap what we've talked about, we'll work a little bit on a better draft around the AP for your consideration. We'll try to look at, AP testing versus course grade versus enrollment, what was suggested. I don't know necessarily that there's other areas to look at tweaking, but I have taken notes of the feedback, and obviously in a comprehensive dashboard or metric, know that, something will not be a standalone, and we'll continue to dig in to the real data.
Thank you. Yep. Appreciate that. All right. Well, at this point, we'd be open to any suggestions for future meetings. All right. Double checking, seeing none. I do just want to put out a reminder that in July, there is a change to the calendar again, so that the Teaching and Learning Committee and the F&F committees will both be that like this week, the 3 days leading up to the full board meeting. So it will be the 11th, the 12th, and the 13th. So the next Teaching and Learning Committee meeting will be here in the boardroom on July 12th at 6 p.m. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.